was an early adopter for Glossier, like really like fresh out the gate. I was like buying all the things. I looked back in my order history, my Glossier order history, when I went to place this order, because I haven't purchased from Glossier in a long time, but have had the same account the whole time. I couldn't believe how many orders I placed from Glossier in like 2016 and 2017, and I couldn't believe how much money it added up to. It was absolutely bananas. Everything they launched, I purchased. And I would buy, like, I remember when they launched the lip gloss, the first time it launched, it was in like a holiday set with like this black ribbon and like a haloscope that I didn't even like the color, and like a nail polish. Is that possible? Did they at one point have a nail polish? And I bought the whole $50 holiday set just to get my hands on that lip gloss because it was newly launched and it wasn't available on its own. Of course, it became available to purchase on its own like a month later, but I was just that girl. I was that kind of beauty shopper. I was that kind of overspender, and I was that kind of Glossier aficionado and addict. I just loved everything. I was picking up everything that they were putting down. Over the years, everything that I bought from Glossier, I've decluttered except for this one cloud paint and my other hero product from them, the Moon Mask, which I don't have right now. I will probably maybe at some point buy that again. I really do love that Moon Mask. And so to me, like the cloud paint and the Moon Mask, like they endured in my life, and I repurchased the Moon Mask. I've used this cloud paint almost down to nothing. I actually did give away the brighter colors, but I kept dust. So I'm going to be calling this video Giving Glossier a Second Chance. I'm not giving a second chance to the concealer or the skin tint. I loved the way that the concealer looked and the way that it performed, and I also love that they've expanded the shade range. So I feel like they have, I think that the lightest one they had before was just light enough to match me. I would have loved to have a shade lighter to kind of give me that veil of brightening that I really like in a concealer. But when I used that concealer, granted my skin was a little bit more troubled than it is now, but it didn't quite break me out. What it did was it really clogged the pores on my chin. It gave me like those underskin bumps and blackheads. I can do it under my eyes. It's okay under my eyes, but down on my chin, which is really where I need concealer the most, I don't want to go through that again. I didn't want to give it a second chance only to find out that it does that, because it takes a long time to get rid of. It's not like acne where it's like a pimple that you can like deal with and then it heals and eventually it will sort of like absorb back into your skin and hopefully not leave a scar. It was never like that. It was like I had to get facial after facial after facial and get all of that stuff extracted and do a bunch of exfoliation, and it just wasn't worth it to me. As much as I would love to find out that that concealer doesn't do that to me anymore, it wasn't worth it to me. And the skin tint, I just feel like I know everything that I need to know. I either want nothing on my skin or like a green color corrector. As you'll see me apply, that's what I have on today, just a green color corrector. Or I want something with a little bit more coverage that I can build. And so that's sort of like all over the face, just like very light coverage. It's a beautiful product, but it wasn't something I wanted to like try again or give a second chance to. I have tried so many of the products, like the body wash products, that lotion, that weird silicone lotion pilled all over my body. The oil I felt like was nice but too expensive for how long it lasted. I've tried the milky jelly. It didn't feel like it was thorough enough for me, getting off all of my eye makeup. I've tried the priming moisturizer. That also I felt like was contributing to the bumps under my skin, because as beautiful as that product is, it was clogging for me. It just like clogged my pores a little bit. It wasn't the ideal skincare product for me. What else have I tried from them? Oh, the perfume I really love. I received a bottle of that perfume for my birthday during my no-buy year, and I used it all up, and then it was in my empties several months ago at this point. So that's one that I have tried and I still love and like fully endorse. I really love that. Oh, the serums, they're just, again, so mild. And even though they have cut the price in half by doubling the size of the bottle, I just don't put stock in those serums when you stack them up against something like the ones from The Ordinary, which still cost less. They say that they're giving you a vitamin C serum and super glow, but then the bottle is like clear glass. The hyaluronic acid, I just feel like you can get, the hyaluronic acid is just like flowing in the streets. Like there's so much hyaluronic acid going on in skincare right now. You don't need to buy like, still, even though they've cut the price, it's still like, to me, it's like a marked up and not necessarily like exquisite in quality version of a hyaluronic acid serum. Same with the niacinamide serum. So I just had no desire to like give those skincare products another try. Boy brow, I've talked about it before on my channel. It doesn't hold my brows in place. It's not strong enough. The lip gloss, I ended up decluttering even after I had it, even after I had bought it, like under the circumstances I described, spending $50 for that whole kit. I did love the really shiny effect, but it was so thick that it would kind of like fall off my lips. So you can see I've had like a not great experience with most things from Glossier. Everything seems to promise perfection and specialness and aesthetic, and then fail me over time. That has been my experience up until now. Except for with the cloud paints, of course, except for with those two hero products, the cloud paint and the mask. However, I have discovered some additional hero products from Glossier and some total fails. Future Dew. TBH. This is the product that made me agree with my own suggestion to myself that I do this video. And it wasn't just the product. When it came out, I was very interested in it. And I was like, that's the kind of thing I really love. But then they were like, it's not primer. It's not primer. It's a skincare. It's skincare. It's like they were sort of trying to put it in the same category as priming moisturizer, which I've talked about so many times. I don't understand that for myself, because to me, a primer is what you put on to prepare your skin for makeup. You either are trying to get your skin to look a certain way with makeup, or you're trying to get the makeup to apply a certain way. Put down, it's like the gesso on your canvas before you start with makeup. You're trying to like prime the skin and also provide like a protective layer between your skin with its skincare and the makeup that you're putting on. So that's like after sunscreen. Right when you're starting your makeup, the first thing you do is prime. And to me, a moisturizer, skincare, you put all of that stuff on before sunscreen, because sunscreen, it's like, yeah, it's skincare, but it's like not good for your skin. It's just protecting your skin from the sun. So to me, there's skincare, which is all of the stuff, including moisturizing, which is to me like a really important part of skincare because I have dry skin. So you do all your skincare, including moisturizing. Then there's this like thing in between, which is sunscreen, where you like protect your skin from the sun. Very important. Then you start the next phase, right? So priming moisturizer, to me, it's like conflating the two across this uncrossable boundary of sunscreen application. It's never made sense to me. And when Future Dew launched, they were pushing it as a hybrid makeup skincare thing. They were pushing it as like a priming moisturizer 2-in-1 type of thing. Like it's makeup-y skincare, it's skincare-y makeup. Even though I was really, really compelled by the bottle, it's so pretty, and by the pictures and even some of the reviews, I talked myself out of it. And I was on a really strict budget last year. I wanted my money for other things. I talked myself out of it because of that, because of the impracticality. Now I know that Glossier really bit themselves in the butt, at least when it comes to consumers like me, by failing to advertise Future Dew correctly, IMHO. They failed to push it as what it really is, which is a primer. A primer, a skin primer, a really unique, stunning, wet look primer that also has really good qualities in terms of like trapping moisture in. I'll go ahead and roll some footage now of the comparison swatches between Future Dew and the VDL Lumi Layer Primer, which is my other beloved priming product, my like holy grail primer, although we all know there's nothing else grail. And I particularly wanted to do this because when I was talking about the VDL Lumi Layer Primer in my yearly favorites video, I was talking about how much I love that glossy, sheeny skin and not like a super metallic shine where there's like particles, like highlighting particles reflecting. And I love this because it's more of like a sheen, like a clear glassy sheen. And then one of you in the comments said that based on my description of this, you thought that I would hate Future Dew. And I was like, I must have done a really bad job of describing what it is I love about this, because I feel like what I love about this, I feel like Future Dew is that it's like doubled. It's clearer, it's glassier, it's wetter. And when I put this on my face, I feel like it's sort of like a slightly iridescent and color correcting sheen. It's really sheeny, but it doesn't necessarily look wet. Like it doesn't look like there's literally water on my face or oil on my face. It just looks really, really sheeny, but without the metallic shine of like the Becca priming, not First Light, but the backlight. Like the Becca backlight priming filter, I just find that metallic. If I put it on my face, I look a little bit like the Tin Man. You know what I mean? Like those Tin Man illuminating primers. I love this because it's not that. It's like this soft, iridescent, sheeny layer. And you'll see when I hold up my hand side by side that it's bluer. And so it balances out my redness more. And that is what makes this my holy grail. Glossier Future Dew is a little bit peachy, so it doesn't do that. It doesn't balance out the redness. It doesn't do any color correcting. I wish it did. I wish they would make like a green version of Future Dew. Oh my God. I would die. I would live and die and live again if they did that. But what it does do is it just looks incredibly wet. It looks like an oil. Like Nina said in her review, it looks like you just finished your evening skincare routine, like packing in moisture, layering on oils, and then maybe like a sheet mask and then another layer of oil. And then your face is just looking like sheeny, glassy, wet, because it actually is wet, like wet with layers of oil. This looks like that. I find that when I put makeup on, and granted, I mean, gosh, I should have said this, but I think a lot of you know already, I wear very little base makeup. When I put on concealer, it's like a pinprick dot and then I blend it out, like very, very little. Again, I think if you were to go in with full coverage foundation, you might not get as much of the benefit as I get with this. In the demo, you'll see I only use the green color corrector and I really kind of blended them together. I love the way that it makes my skin look. It can be a little bit extreme. They say to use 2 pumps. I used 1.5 in the demo because I wanted you to really be able to see it. On a day-to-day basis, I just use 1 pump and that's enough for me. If I use 2 pumps, I look like my face is soaked in oil in a good way all day long. As much as I think Glossier Future Dew works as a good primer for me, like I really like how it performs as a primer, they didn't design it specifically to be that. They designed it to be this just like prettiness on your face. So I trust the VDL for longer wear. I trust it more. But I am in love with Future Dew. I'm all about the Future Dew life. I really, really, really love it. So after color correcting in the areas that need color correcting, I went in with the cloud paint. And I have talked about this so much on my channel, and I have demonstrated it a number of times on my channel. I've demonstrated it to look like this on my channel. I don't feel like I need to go on about it at length. When I was putting it on today, I was reminded that something that's truly amazing about it is how it sets down, but without losing its skin-like quality. And to me, the thing that's the most emblematic of that is that I can put it on my eyes, as you'll see me do in the demo, tap it onto my eyes, blend it out as like just a quick like watercolory look all over my eyes. And it doesn't feel like it sets like dry, you know, like a liquid eyeshadow, but it also doesn't crease. It's almost like it stains. It sits into the skin as if it's a stain, but then it doesn't actually stain, meaning that you can just like scrape it off and very easily wash it off and there's no stain left behind. So that's pretty remarkable for something to behave like a stain, leave behind a bit of a skin-like sheen, and then not crease on the eyes. To me, that is the thing that makes this distinctive, in addition to the fact that the colors are very beautiful. I really love Dusk. It's the only one for me. Dusk is really the only one for me. In the cloud paints, the other ones are too bright because I'm so pale. They will like make me look a bit clownish, a bit like I'm trying to look younger than I am. So Dusk is the right one for me. And then the last thing I wanted to say about it is that it works beautifully with the Future Dew. You'll see in the demo, I don't have anything else on my cheeks besides the Future Dew when I go in with this, because the Algenist color corrector I just put kind of in my T-zone, and you'll be able to see the way that it looks when it mixes with the Future Dew, that like sheeny, glossy, skin-like finish. I just love the way that those two look together. This product, I think I tried to declutter this. I actually think it was in my giveaway box, but I pulled it out because I knew I was going to be trying it some more and reviewing it for this video. I realized that I had it and I was like, yeah. Anyway, I tried to declutter it because the rose scent mixed with the fact that the mist is so very fine, it makes me cough, makes me sneeze. And it's not like I'm allergic to rose or something. I think it's how fine the mist is. So every time I spray it, I like it. I like the experience. I like the way it smells. It's all very nice. And then I'm like, Like it gets inside my nose. It's super weird. So I have so many mists that I'm trying to get through and test. I was just like, why not? The bottle is more than half full. I was like, why not give it away to someone who will enjoy it? But then I pulled it back out and I put it with the other Glossier stuff because I was like, I'm going to talk about it again in the video. Then I had an absolute brainwave and I started using it for a very non-traditional purpose, which I will demonstrate in the footage. I've been using it to spray my spoolie before going into the cake of soap that I keep on my vanity. And because of that, I've been able to do away with a little bowl of water that I was keeping on my vanity because I just use this instead. And it smells nice and whatever's in it, there aren't enough like oils and extracts and stuff to disturb my brows or like mess them up. In fact, I think it's good that it's like putting some nourishing stuff onto the skin behind my eyebrow hairs because sometimes that skin can get a little bit irritated because I think the soap dries it out. So I feel like it's actually good for my brows and it's just so much more elegant and less messy and I can really control the amount. Often with soap brows, if I dip the spoolie into the bowl of water, it'll get like too wet and then there will be like a bunch of gunky soap. It'll be too wet on the spoolie and I'll have to like wipe it off and dry it off and it's this whole process. When I spray this onto the spoolie, it's probably because of that very fine mist. It gets just the right amount on the spoolie for me to get just the level of like wetness and dryness combined in the soap that's in the spoolie for me to brush it into my brows. And I really like it. I'm going to keep it out on my vanity and I'm going to keep using it for that purpose. And I will probably use it up in that role because I have been using it absolutely every day because I do soap brows pretty much every day. As a face mist, no, I don't love it. But as a mist repurposed, yes, it's winning. Wouldn't buy it though. I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that someone buy it. I wouldn't have spent my own money on it and I probably won't spend money to replace it. I'm just enjoying using it. I think Simbri gave this to me a while back. It's the moment we've all been waiting for, kind of, not really, not me. This is the product that is the most emblematic. Isn't that the second time, maybe even the third time I've said emblematic in this video? I feel like the word emblematic is emblematic of this video. I would not have purchased this based on its description, based on its claims. I would not have purchased this if I were not doing a review video. So this is the product that's emblematic of my act of like buying products specifically to review. I felt like if I was going to revisit Glossier and purchase a couple of the products that have come out since I stopped buying from them, which is essentially what happened, and then also revisit a product that has been reformulated, the lipstick. If I was going to do that, I felt like I couldn't skip the mascara because it was such a huge release for them. A mascara it's such an important like member of like a line of makeup, I feel. And I was curious about it. I was not curious enough, again, to have like bought it for myself with my own money. Just if I weren't on YouTube, I would never have bought this. But I'm glad I got to try it out because I have thoughts. I like mascaras that provide dramatic volume at the roots and then fluff out. So they advertise Lash Slick as being like a separating mascara, like it coats every individual lash and then it separates them and it makes them really like long and slender, like a skinny, like individual, I guess. And I don't want that. I don't want clumps, like spider clumps, but I do want my mascara to like wed my lashes together into a panel that goes splink, splink. So I wasn't expecting it to do that. I wasn't expecting it to do what I love because it's advertised specifically as doing not that. One of the things I don't like about it is the name, Lash Slick. I'm like, no, I don't want Lash Slick. I want lash like sticky and fluffy and floofy and puffy and like, you know, spindly like a beetle's leg. What was I talking about before? I've talked about this recently, like when you rub a beetle's leg the wrong direction and it has that like grippy feeling. A good mascara sort of like makes my lashes like that, like little beetle's legs that they like build together and stick together. I like a tangled lash. I like when it's kind of long and tangled and but full. So the thing I do like about Lash Slick is it gives me that tangled lash because what it does is it makes the lashes very long and thin looking, and then it does sort of add little like tink, little like splinky, almost like beetle's legs, but like individually rather than like all tangled together. It's like just a few beetle's legs rather than like a whole bunch of them. What it's really good for me, two things: layering. So when this package first arrived, I was wearing the Milani Highly Rated, which is the mascara that I love. It does all of the things that I was just saying that I want a mascara to do. I had been wearing it all day and it had kind of, the volume was still in the roots, but the length had kind of worn off, you know what I'm talking about? And I took this out and I layered it on top of what was already there. And I was like, I went to Joe, I was like, look at this. I like this so much better than I was expecting to, because it took that volume and it like added to it, and it made the tips of my lashes like long and tangled in this sultry way. It was just like these, like my lashes were just like, oh, hi. Like, hi. You know, they were just like, they were like, how did I get here? I'm so tangled up, you know? And I was just like, splink, splink, but in this sort of boudoir way. And I was all about that life. So the next morning I got up, I put on my makeup, I had like a clean face, clean lashes. I was so excited. And I went in with this, and it was just like skinny, spindly twigs, really long and skinny, but spindly. And the more I built, the more spindly they became. And I determined that the brush is taking like 3 or 4 lashes and like turning them into just one really skinny thing. So it makes it seem like I have fewer lashes than I do. It works really well for building. I've never liked it on its own on my top lashes. But the other thing that I do really like it for is the bottom lashes. I really like what it does to my bottom lashes. My bottom lashes are very long. And if I sometimes when I put like my best mascaras on my bottom lashes, it makes me look like I was wearing a striped shirt when I was home for the holidays, and I was wearing a very light makeup look, but I had gone in, this is just like one day during Christmas, I had gone in like pretty hard with the mascara on my top and my bottom lashes, as I do. I just wasn't thinking. I was like, mascara, mascara, mascara. And I was standing in the kitchen trying to decide what to do next. And my sister looked over at me and she was like, you look like a scared mime. And I'm sure she said that I looked like a scared mime because I was wearing a black and white striped shirt. But then later she said that it had also been because I had like these really intense, both upper and lower lashes, like the mime makeup, you know what I mean? And so sometimes when I put regular mascara on my lower lashes, it makes me look like a scared mime. Like it makes me look like, this never does that to my lower lashes. And I've never been the kind of bee to have a dedicated lower lash mascara, but that is going to be the fate of Glossier Lash Slick after I film this video and I no longer feel like I have to keep trying with it on my upper lashes, because I've tried. Lord, I tried. I like tried to get it to a point. And I know for me, mascaras too, often they don't really come into their own until like the 2nd or 3rd week. I've been trying for a long time with this, using it day after day after day, hoping it would like dry out and change and like become my dream. It hasn't happened. And so I'm going to stop trying to use it on my upper lashes, but I'm going to continue to use it on my lower lashes. I'm going to be that bee until I've used up this tube, and then I won't be buying it again. And lastly, let's talk about, this is very interesting. So the Generation G, I was an early adopter, as I think I've said, of Glossier. I purchased this when it was freshly released. At that time, I purchased the color Leo because I suspected, I was just starting to understand myself and my feelings and my coloring and my makeup. And it was the first time that I was like, maybe a brown Hannah. And indeed, I loved the color of that lipstick. I loved it. I would always put it on and just be like, I also got the red zip when it came out, and I really liked that too. It was very beautiful. But that formula, it would just like evaporate off of my lips. I gave it the old college try, especially with Leo, because I loved the way that it looked. And I would put it on, and then I would just like literally like 30 minutes later, when I had done nothing except sit there, it would be gone. It was like my lips soaked it in or something. Whatever they had put in it, maybe it was silicones or they'd put something in it to make it have that blotted effect. It just made it slide right off. I was able to put up with that, especially with the zip. I would apply it and apply it, or no, especially with Leo, I would like apply it and apply it and apply it because I just loved the color so much. But the packaging, the unit that they had was very dinky, and eventually they both broke. Actually, in pretty short order, they both broke. They like wouldn't roll up. They got smashed. It was like cracked, like the lid was cracked. So it was a declutter, I think, during my no-buy year when I was just like, I love these colors and I love the idea of them, and I'm attached to Glossier still. At that time, Glossier hadn't like entirely lost my loyalty. I was like, I'm attached, but these are just like gross now and don't work very well. So I parted with them. When I went to place this order and I started doing some research, I realized that they have reformulated the Generation G lipsticks a number of times, and that these new ones are in a much sturdier, much glossier package. Like it's a glossy, sturdy, thick bullet. The one thing I don't like about the packaging is that even if it's just rolled up a little bit, if you put it in with if you put the lid on, it will smash it. It has to be rolled all the way down into the tube for you to be able to put the lid on. And I found that out the hard way. That's a little bit annoying. I feel like that they could have designed it a tiny, just to give it a little room. Like you should be able to have it rolled up a tiny bit and put it in, but no, you have to roll it all the way flat. I also read that they had reformulated, and I heard Mariah Leonard talking about it. I heard Mariah Leonard saying that they had changed the formula and just made it much beefier, much sturdier. And you will see in the footage when I'm putting this on, I layer it on pretty heavily, and it does have that amazing blotted quality where you can layer it and layer it and layer it without it being like shocking. But you'll see that I get quite a dark look when I layered it in the footage. And you'll see I'll like do a little, I'll put in some footage of myself like doing a little voguing right after I put it on. You'll be able to see it's quite dramatic, and the color is just to die for. I absolutely love it. This is actually a smash hit. The Future Do is definitely the thing I've loved using the most from this order, but I have also really loved taking this. I've grabbed it a lot. I've worn it a lot just because I wanted to. Like I was doing it because I wanted to and not because I had to review it for this video. And I've worn it in a bunch of videos so far, thrown it in my bag a lot. It's just great. I'm very happy to be like adding it to my collection. I thought that this would be one of the things. This is the balm.com, the rose one, and this was again given to me at BeautyCon. I thought that I would strongly dislike this. I had the coconut one for a long time. I like made a lot of progress on that. I used it like way almost all the way up. I didn't really love the coconut smell on that. And I also didn't find it to be that special. Like everyone talks about how it's like this amazing moisturizing thing. It's just like Vaseline, you know, it's just like occlusive. It's just petroleum jelly. But Vaseline occlusiveness is actually, it can be really good if your lips are moisturized underneath it. And the thing that has surprised me, I like the rose one way better. I like the tint. I like the sensorial experience of using it way better than I liked the coconut one. So I've just been much more fond of this than I ever was of the balm.com that I bought myself all those years ago. The sheen that it gives to the lips is very beautiful. I have it on now, as you saw when I rolled the footage. I applied it after I applied Leo, and it makes this sort of blotted matte-ish formula, it makes it look sort of like a balmy gloss, and it looks really beautiful. It looks very sensual. It works really well to like juice up your lips if your lips are dry partway through the day but still have some color on them from some kind of lipstick. It just surprised me. I was going to give this away. It was like in my giveaway box. It was similar to this. I pulled it and then I inventoried it. I pulled it to use for this project because I was like, oh, if I'm giving Glossier a second chance, I should try that thing that I was going to give away. And I'm really, really glad that I did. I'm glad. I like it. I don't think I would buy it. Like this is only nourishing in that it traps the moisture in and doesn't let it evaporate. It's not actually like giving good stuff to your lips, to your skin, to your lip skin. So if I were to buy a lip balm for myself, I would buy one that has like intense healing properties, like a really, really, really good one. This isn't that to me. It's a little bit more fun. It's almost as though I enjoy it more for its cosmetic properties than I do for its actual like lip balm or lip nourishing properties, but I've been enjoying it a lot for its cosmetic properties. And a lot of times over the past couple of weeks since I started trying these things for review, many days I've put on this Leo at the end of my makeup routine. It's a nice neutral for me, like doesn't compete with other things, no matter what other shades I'm wearing on my face. And I'll throw this in my bag because I'm wearing it, and then I'll throw this in my bag in case my lips get a little dry, and I'll go and I'll like apply them both throughout the day. I'm very happy to see that with this release, there are a number of shades of brown. I think there are 3 shades of brown. One of the things, the only thing that I didn't like about the Vanillic lip, which if you don't know, let me just give you the full background. I love this product, the Vanillic lip. It's pretty much my favorite lip product of all time, and Glossier has rudely discontinued it. The reason that I was so eager to review this, and the reason that I'm so eager to kind of film right away now that I have them in my hands, is that it seems to be the thing that they're replacing the Vanillic lip with. So I definitely have an interest in whether it's something I'm going to like or not, whether it'll serve the same purpose for those lovers of the Vanillic lip who have now been disappointed, or not. The only thing that I didn't like about the vanillic lips was that there was no brown in the range. The closest thing to brown was this very, very mauve color called Pony. Now, the Ultra Lip comes in 3 shades of brown, and I purchased one of them, Trench, the kind of lightest, and you know, it's the one that seems comparable to Leo from the Generation G. So I got Trench, I got Villa, which is like a rose. I'm wearing it on my lips right now, in fact. And then the other two, the two that I haven't opened yet, are Coupe, which is a red, and Lucite, which is a pale pink. I'm going to open all 4 bullets right now and show them to you close up. So this is what the packaging looks like. It's exactly the same as the packaging of the Generation G, except that it's light pink instead of white, and it says Ultra Lip on it instead of saying Generation G. Generation G is their matte lipstick formula, so it appears that they're positioning this as like a glossy version of Generation G. This is the color Coupe. This is the color Lucite. It looks more pink and more like it might have a pinky presence on the lips than I was hoping for, but here it is. Here's Villa, which again I'm wearing right now, and it looks a little bit more neutral and browny in the tube. I find that it applies pretty pink in its own way to the lips as well. And lastly, this is Trench, which is that kind of neutral, warm brown. It's a little bit more orange than I was expecting it to be. And here are the 4 colors next to each other. We've got Lucite, Coupe, Villa, and Trench. Let's talk about the formula, and then I'll do some lip swatches, and then I'll do some comparison swatches to other products in my collection. It has no scent. That disappointed me, weirdly. I think it's because I love the apricot flavor of the vanillic lip. I don't usually like fruit flavored or fruit scented lip products. I tend to like vanilla, but the scent and the flavor, although it's not like you're tasting it with your mouth, but you know, the flavoring of the vanillic lip, it's like my favorite scent of any lip product ever. I just think that apricot, kind of warm apricot, is a really beautiful scent for something that you're putting on your lips. I realized when I started applying this and found it was completely scentless and completely tasteless, that one of the things I like about the vanillic lip is that it makes me want to keep applying it because of the sensory experience. And I want a product like this, like a balmy product with color, to make me want to keep applying it in that same way. I appreciate it when a product does that. However, I know there are a lot of people out there that are just always begging brands to make scentless and flavorless products. And so I understand why they did it. And I'm sure that for a lot of people, it's going to be music to your ears, you know, that I'm reporting to you that it has no scent. But to me, it's a little bit of a strike against it because it makes me feel like less excited to put it on. It just does. I'm building up Villa on my lips so you can see what it looks like at full opacity, and so that I can tell you about the experience of applying more of it. So you can see it is pretty buildable. It's definitely feels like you can keep applying it. It feels that way, but it's also pretty pigmented. And another thing that I realized when I applied it for the first time last night, I realized that I had been hoping that it would really be kind of semi-sheer, the kind of thing that you truly can't mess up. Like, it's impossible to put on too much of it. It's impossible for it to go outside of the lip lines. It's actually not really that. It's got a bit of heft to it. It's got a bit of a punch in terms of pigment. It looks like a lipstick. I feel it looks like I'm wearing a lipstick, and it actually looks kind of like a shiny lipstick. Whereas the vanillic lip is like a semi-sheer product. And I always was surprised by how much this wasn't like a lipstick. And I would compare the vanillic lip formula to other products that claim to be more balmy, like the M Cosmetics Infinite Lip Cushion. No, just lip cushion. Lip cushion, the M Cosmetics lip cushion. And I would find that the vanillic lip was way more sheer than the lip cushion. And that was part of why I liked it. This is turning up like pigmented. It is like, to me, this looks like what vanillic lip sounds like it would be. It's vanillic and then it's really shiny, and it's pretty pigmented. So I found that it was a little bit more difficult to overline without it starting to look a little bit sloppy with this than the vanillic lip was. But the feeling of it, there are a couple of things I really like about it. One, it's nice. It's really slick. It feels super nourishing. That's great. The other, it's beefy. It's not going to melt away. It's like the opposite of a lip oil. It feels a little stiff, like stiffer than you would have expected it. It's kind of stiff in the tube, and then it's like melting onto the lips, but it's sort of staying stiff. So you feel like this firm presence of it on the lips, but it doesn't at all stick together. It doesn't stick to itself. So it's definitely not really in the lip gloss territory. It's like a hybrid of all of those things. And I feel like that is what Glossier excels at, kind of making hybrids of categories of makeup products. I think ultimately I was hoping that it would be a really laid back, toned down lip that I could easily pair with like a strong cheek look or a strong eye look and not feel like I had like a full pop of makeup on my lips, but just something that was like complementing stronger makeup elsewhere on my face. And actually putting it on, I feel, at least with the two colors I've tried, so Trench, the brown, and Villa, which, you know, I thought was going to be like the easiest and most nude for me and the most neutral to wear. But with both of these colors, it feels like a real lipstick look on my lips. Or actually, the way that I feel is that I could mess with it and blot it and make it less high impact. Let me just do that to show you. Yeah, even just one good blot has like melted it into my lips and really made it look like much more natural, like much less high impact. So I can wear it that way, but it doesn't feel as good. It feels like this product is really living its best life on my lips when I build it up and make like a shiny, thick layer. But that is like a strong lip look. It's not the casual, easy, sort of subtle lip look that I was hoping to get from this product. I know that I'm going to be wearing it blotted like this. But physically, sensually, it does make me want to keep layering it and layering it. So for all those reasons, and I think that mainly it's because it's not as sheer, like it's more opaque than the vanillic lip. That's the main reason. And for all of the reasons that then result from that one reason, I don't like it as much. And I wasn't expecting to. I love the sponge tip applicator of the vanillic lip. I don't traditionally get along as well with bullets. It's really that it feels like there's more pigment and more of a lacquer quality. That's the thing that is going to make me love it a little bit less. But I bet I'll still end up wearing them. And of course, I'll report back about that. Okay, let's get into some swatches. And actually, I'm curious to find out whether or not the actual swatches are more sheer or not. Like, I want to know if this is just sort of psychological. So I'm going to go ahead and just do some quick hand swatches, and then I'll do the lip swatches. So there's Villa on my hand. It's going to be the one that's the easiest to compare to other things, I think, because of the color. Here's the vanillic lip Genius, which I'm going to put right next to it. So actually, Genius is in the middle. So it's like it's a lighter color, but it doesn't look all that much more sheer. It's just that it's a little bit balmier and a little bit less glossy. Pony though, which is my favorite of the vanillic lips, it does seem like it's shearing out a little bit more. So there's Pony there and Genius. Those are the two vanillic lips. And then here's the Ultra Lip in Villa. And so you can see it looks a little bit more pigmented and more slick and more shiny. It looks more vanillic, ironically. And then these two have a little bit more of kind of that satin, almost watercolory look. And they look a little bit more sheer, a little bit like they're gonna be one with the lips, that's exactly how I felt. Like that's exactly what I was expecting them to show in the swatches based on how the two products apply. So again, this one closest to my thumb is the Ultra Lip. It's just thicker. It's like a thick, shiny layer, almost like more like Vaseline than the other two, but with more body than Vaseline. Okay, so again, I was wearing Villa at full opacity before, and then I blotted it down, and that's this. Now let me give you lip swatches of the other three. This is Trench, which is the brown one. So there it is with just a quick applique, like I just put on a tiny bit. And here's the thing, it went on really nicely, like it feels nice, it was easy to apply, but I don't love how it looks. Like when I look in the monitor and I look in the mirror, I don't love the look. I feel like the fact that it's so shiny, like it's ultra shiny, and I feel like weirdly, I know this is counterintuitive, but weirdly it's like it makes my lips look a little bit thin, like a little bit over made up in some way. Just a little awkward. It doesn't have that like natural, worn in, just sort of plump, easy look that I feel like I always get from the vanillic lips, even when I just swipe them on. It reminds me quite a lot actually of the M Cosmetics lip cushion. And I'll be doing some comparison swatches. I bet that we're going to find that it's the thing that's the closest formula-wise of anything that I own. And what I feel about that, what I struggle with that, is what I feel about this, what I am struggling with this, which is that one application, just swiping it on, the finish, just if you're looking close up at the surface of my lip, looks good. But the overall effect on the face, it just looks a little bit awkward, overdone, and a tiny bit unflattering on my lips. I like a lip product to kind of assist my lips in looking a little bit plumper. So what I want to do is fuss with it. I want to overline, I want to kind of smudge the edges, and I'm going to go ahead and do that right now so you can see what it looks like when I kind of like get it to look the best that I think that I can get it to look. So there I've overlined and I've applied more. I've given it like a more full pigment application so you can see the color. And it's pretty. I think that people who like love their natural lip shape, especially people who have like really lovely, juicy lips, are gonna love this product because it really does look beautiful. I know that I'm gonna feel more comfortable if I blot it down a little bit. And that has left a nice moisturizing layer on the lips. It hasn't left very much pigment behind, and that's how I'm gonna be wearing this color for sure. And I think it's nice. A lot of it came off on my hand. So that was Trench. Let us now look at Lucite, which is the pale pink. I'm curious to find out how sheer it is, or rather how opaque it is. Okay, this is striking me as much less pigmented. I feel like a color this pink and this pale at the same level of pigment or opacity as these two would not be looking quite like this. Like you can see it has lightened up my lips a little bit, like it's left a tint on there, but it's like a cross between something pigmented and something just sheer and balmy. And I quite like that. I was hoping that they would all be at about this level of pigment. I'm also relieved. I think that what they did was they adjusted the pigment, they adjusted the opacity for the color. Because it's such a light color, they knew that it would apply better and look better if it was just a little more sheer. And I'm glad that they did that. So there it is, more built up, more overlined. I love this. This is definitely the most wearable one, and the one that I can't wait to keep wearing this. I'm so glad that it worked out this way, and I'm really glad that I decided to test this color. I have pretty pigmented lips, so a lot of times sheer-ish or balmy-ish products, these kind of like lipstick cum balm products that are in these light colors, a lot of times they don't work on me because they kind of settle in the lip lines and the color of my lips comes through and it looks a little awkward. This is somehow successfully lightening the shade of my lips, but without looking weird, without sitting weird on top of them. And it's just instant love. I'm like, let's stay together. Glossier, ULTRALIP, and Lucite. So there it is built up. I mean, this is as opaque as I could get it. This is like full opacity. And there it is blotted. I mean, it's like visually, when you blot this one, it's like a barely there. It really is like a barely there balm, but it feels great. Lastly, let's take a look at Coupe, the kind of orange leaning red. It's much harder to overline with a glossy product than with a matte product because the reflect, the shine, shows the contour of the lip, and it shows that it, you know what I mean? Like you can see the product wrapping around the lip line, and it doesn't create an illusion of larger lips as easily as a matte product does. And this one, it's so pigmented. I mean, this is a red lipstick. Like what we're dealing with here, friends, is a red lipstick. It's so pigmented that once I did it, it was really hard to take it back. Like if I were going to clean up that lip line, I'd really have to use concealer, maybe even makeup remover, and then conceal over it. So this is just, I know I look a little bit like a blow up doll, but this is like what we're dealing with right now. A glossy red lip is a beautiful thing, especially when it's well formulated and the color is pretty. The color of this is really, it's really pretty. For me, I would like it if it leaned a little bit more orange. Like I feel like sometimes these orange leaning reds, they kind of turn pink a little bit, like rather than a blue red, they'll turn in like the watermelon coral direction. This is almost like an orange coral lip. And again, it's a stunning color and it's hard not to love. You know what I mean? Like it's hard not to love a color like this. It's so high impact. It's so fresh, very summer. And you know, it'll be fun to wear for people. Maybe for me, I'm not yet sure if I'll keep this color, but it'll be fun for people to wear. But I find that of the four that I'm trying, this is the hardest to control. It's the hardest to pull off because a really shiny, thick, slippy formula like this in a statement color, it's just more finicky. Like it's hard. You can't just slather it on. And it's not even slathering. It's like you can't even just throw it on and go. You kind of have to mess with it and make sure that you're okay. And I personally, if I were wearing this and like eating and drinking and getting my life, I would feel like I was always having to check my teeth, check a mirror. This isn't really like an effortless, everyday, cool girl product. It doesn't really, for me. I mean, I understand why. It's like this product, the style of it fits the Glossier aesthetic, and I understand why they did the full range, all of the browns and brown nudes, which is fantastic to see, some sort of mid-tone pinky nudes, and then a couple of reds. Of course, that's what they did. But, you know, going through all of those steps ended them up with a red lipstick, a super shiny red lipstick that doesn't have the ease of use that I think a lot of things that Glossier makes have. Just be aware of that. You know what I mean? Like if you enjoy Glossier and you're shopping at Glossier because you really want things to be super easy and not only to be effortless, but to look effortless, this one, you maybe think twice about it. I'm not saying you can't make it work. I think for some people it'll be perfect. But just know that you're going to have a much easier time both feeling and looking like you didn't try too hard with these colors than you are with one of the reds in this really, really glossy, slick, just shiny, all over the place formula. I do kind of love the, like, I mean, it does look like I tried hard, or I tried at least, and I ended up with this, like, it's got that like sensual sloppiness about it. You know what I mean? It's like rich, red, shiny, just like sexy, sloppy lips. And I do love that. Like, I think that's really wonderful. And it's fun to like have that lip on, and it's fun to think about like wearing that kind of lip once in a while in the summer. But it's just not, it's not what I usually think of doing with Glossier products, and it's not what I usually expect to see from Glossier. This looks like more Gucci to me, or more like something you might do with a little sample size of like a YSL lip vinyl that you got at Sephora 5 years ago. I'm gonna take this off just because it's so very that. And I'm probably gonna I'll see if I can put this one on or if this has stained my lips. And then I'm gonna do some swatches on my hands comparing these to other products that I own. I got a teeny tiny bit of color left behind, but it didn't really stain. And it didn't stain like my upper lip where I had overlined. So that's good and good to know. The first thing I wanna do is compare Villa to the M Cosmetics lip cushion in Venetian Rose. They seem to me to be the same product. So there are the tips of the bullets next to each other, and I just swatched them so you can see how melty, they both got kind of melty, and they both have that really high shine, almost liquid look to them. When they're warmed up by the skin, they get that really melty high shine look. So on swatching, I found that Venetian Rose, it's not only darker in color, but it is more pigmented. It's a little more pigmented. So I might have been calling this the vanilla lip from time to time, but the Ultra Lip here in Villa is a little bit more balmy, but they're very similar. And the way they feel, like the finish that they give to the lips physically is very similar. So if you've tried the lip cushion, that's your comp. Like that's what you can keep in your mind when you're thinking about these products. Let's look at Coupe next to some browns. So I actually have this is my Sephora birthday gift. It's this little mini of the Laguna, the Afterglow Lip Balm in Laguna from NARS. And I also am going to compare it to the Fenty Beauty Pro Kisser Luscious Lip Balm in Cocoa Drizzle. And for color, actually, let's compare it to Jason Wu Biscotti. That's a matte lip and cheek, but I think the color might be kind of similar. I'm gonna put the NARS product right next to it. So NARS Afterglow Lip Balm in Laguna is much balmier and much more sheer, way less pigment, but the color is actually probably pretty similar. Coupe might be a little bit rosier, but it's a pretty similar color. Very different consistency though. Cocoa Drizzle from Fenty is a much deeper, much more cool toned brown, really different. And that's like a liquid balm. The pigment level is a little bit closer though to the Ultra Lip than it is to the NARS. And just for color, there's Biscotti on the end. It's actually making, like these swatches are making the Ultra Lip and Coupe seem really, really brick, kind of like a real terracotta brown rather than like a nude brown or neutral brown. The only thing that I really have to compare to Lucite, the one I'm wearing, is the Tower 28 Lip Jelly in the shade Oat. So there's Lucite. See how sheer it looks? And I'm not just talking about the light color. Like, I feel like it looks more sheer, like it's swatched in a way that makes it look more like the NARS thing that I had on my hand before, or even more like the Fenty Pro Kisser lip balm than the other two Ultra Lips that I have swatched. Yeah, here's Tower 28 Oat. It looks more pigmented. And remember when I first got this, I was struggling, and I still do a little bit. I have to wear a pretty thin layer of it, or else I struggle with this like weird line of pigment that gets pushed to the edge of my lips because there's so much pigment in it, and yet it's this very, very pale color. I feel like that's what they would have run into with this Glossier product if they hadn't toned down the pigment, if they hadn't made it more sheer. There's Oat on the top. I like the color of Oat better, but the balmy sheer quality and the level of pigment is much better in Lucite. Like, honestly, the lip that I have on right now, this is what I was hoping that I was buying when I bought Oat from Tower 28. And lastly, the moment we've all been waiting for, let's compare Coupe to Goldie Red, the Gucci lip voile. There's Coupe. I can already tell it's gonna be like more of a fire red. Well, okay, I'm sorry to report to those of you who are hoping that this was a dupe and that you could buy the Glossier one. If you've always wanted Goldie Red and you were like, maybe I can get the Glossier one. Here's the thing about Goldie Red, which is right here. This is the Glossier, that's Coupe, and that's Goldie Red, the Gucci lip voile. It's a little dirty. It's got this really special kind of like dirty tone to it. And it's also more balmy. This one, the Glossier one here, is much more shiny, much thicker. It's like that thick layer of like painted on lacquer. And Goldie Red is a little bit more something that's going to like melt into the lips and become one with the lips. Sorry, I had to take a quick break. I think that I was about to say that to me, Goldie Red from Gucci, the lip voile, it actually is, it's not just the color, it's like the combination of the color and the formula and even the packaging. There really is nothing like it. Like, I really, really do love it. I have tried a couple of like drugstore things, other things, K-beauty things, to see if I could find something where it's like, this is a really great dupe for Goldie Red. The thing is that in practice, there are a lot of things that are really similar to it. You definitely don't have to go buy it if you want like a balmy semi-sheer lip. There are a lot of things, but I've never swatched something and been like, oh yeah, this is like a dead ringer for Gucci's Goldie Red. It has a special place kind of like in my heart and in my collection. But I want to swatch the reds from the Vanillic lip range alongside Coupe. I'm gonna swatch Casino first alongside Coupe. I feel like they're probably almost exactly the same, if not exactly the same. And I'll also put Goldie Red back on my hand so you can see kind of like all of the reds together. So there's Coupe, that's the Ultra Lip. Casino is almost the same, but I actually find that is a bit more orange. Like, it has a little bit less of that watermelon coral tint that I was saying is the thing that I don't like about Coupe, the Ultra Lip. It's a little bit closer to just like a straight orange, but they are, especially for all intents and purposes, they are really similar. There's Disco in the middle. That is one of my two favorites of the Vanillic lip range. It's like a really, really amazing, easy to wear brick, kind of like terracotta. Actually, I think that brick implies a little bit more of like a blue tone, and that's what you get with Driver, which is this fourth one. And then lastly, Goldie Red, which is more sheer and balmy than any of them, probably closest to Disco of any of them, but still, it's like a little bit less terracotta and dusky and a little bit more red than Disco, but way, way duskier than these other brighter ones. So again, Coupe, the Ultra Lip, is there at the bottom. Then we have the 3 Vanillic lips, and on top is the Gucci. Y'all, some drama has unexpectedly gone down in the middle. I mean, I guess towards the end of filming this review. I had to get up and help with something in the house. And help with something. And then I came back and I filmed the outro, but somehow it wasn't recorded. Like, it started recording and then it like turned off right away and I didn't notice. And I like filmed the whole outro and it wasn't recorded. So we're trying again. But I did want to tell you that when I got up to do things, I was talking to Joe right before I came back to film, to do what I thought was filming the outro, but was in fact filming nothing. I was talking to Joe and he took one look at me and he was like, what's going on with your glossy little lips? Like, he noticed that something was different, and he doesn't usually notice that kind of thing. I think that it's a combination of the finish of this product and the fact that the color is lighter than my natural lip color. And it's actually it has been until this moment impossible for me to wear a product like that. Everything I've ever found that's like glossy and lighter than my lips looks a little bit weird. And I do love the look, but it's just, I haven't been able to find a product that worked that way. And so it was so different from what I usually have on that he noticed. And, he thought that it looked nice. So I feel like that's just like something that I can add to the review. And it speaks to my point as I kind of like round out my thoughts here, which is my main point. My main takeaway is just that this color in this product, Lucite, is such a find for me. I didn't expect any of these colors to excite me as much as this one has. I'm really excited for this. I feel like it's going to definitely be one of those things where I'm super excited about it and I wear it like every day for the next 2 weeks. And then the big question, the long-term question that I can't answer in this video is, will I then continue to wear it pretty assiduously? Will I then really incorporate it in the everyday until I've used it up? You know what I mean? Is it going to be like a long-term love for me, or is it just going to be kind of this short-term infatuation that then falls off? I'll make sure that I come back at some point in a future video and update you on that. The other 3 colors, I don't see myself wearing as often. I think that Coupe, I will definitely if I ever want a look like this, Coupe is like the bright red one. If I ever want this look, what I will be doing is wearing Gucci Goldie Red instead. And if I don't want to wear Gucci Goldie Red, if I want something kind of like more orange or like much more high impact and glossy, I'll be wearing the Vanilla Lip in Casino instead. It's cool in its own way. Like, it was very high impact. I think for some people this is going to be the thing in this formula, but for me, I have other products that just for small differences in the formula and color, I like better. And these 2, it's a little bit hard for me to know how I'll behave around them. I kind of sense that I'll be kept from grabbing them by the fact that the combination of the pretty high level of pigment and the super glossy and really like beefy quality of them can make them a little bit difficult. Like, both of them looked, I thought, really quite good when I glossed them on a lot and then blotted them. And so I might end up wearing them more than I think I will because the colors are pretty nice and the finish is pretty effortless. I could see myself using them to like give myself a lip look that's something, but that doesn't compete with a strong eye look or a strong cheek look for filming. I could see myself doing that with these, but I could also see myself thinking I'm gonna do that and then pretty much never reaching for them. So I will also report back about these in a future video. I got the idea last night and then I woke up this morning and I was like, I'm doing it. I'm going to try to review everything I've ever tried from Glossier all in one video. It's not everything. I haven't tried everything from Glossier, but it's a number of things. It's a lot. And so I'm gonna try to spend less than a minute on each product. If she stays here for Sadie, if you stay here for the whole video, we can call it reviewing 30 Glossier products in 30 minutes holding a cat. I feel like that would go over well in the algorithm. Sadie doesn't care about the algorithm. So I've pulled up the shop all products on the Glossier website and I'm scrolling through and I'm just going to pick out the products that I've tried one by one in the order in which they appear on the site, and I'm going to talk about them one by one. The first thing that has come up is the Milky Jelly Cleanser. I tried this back in the day when Glossier was first launching and I was trying everything, and it's nice, but it doesn't feel very thorough to me. It's like pleasant to use, a nice experience, but it only works as like the definitely second cleanse. If you wear makeup, a second cleanse, if your first cleanse is really, really thorough. So if you're using an oil cleanser that gets almost everything off your face and you want your second cleanser to be just something really gentle and mild that comes through and does like a last wash, then Milky Jelly will work for you. I found that after I used it up, I wasn't compelled to buy another one. And it's also partly because of the cost per use. I felt like I was going through it kind of quickly and having to rebuy it a lot, and it was ending up kind of costing more. I feel like you can find similarly mild, pleasant cleansers, something so simple. You can find similar things that have way better value, like way better cost per use. So I've never repurchased that. The priming moisturizer is another thing that I tried way back when it launched, way back when it started. And I really liked it, but at the time I felt like I wasn't totally sure that it wasn't clogging my pores. This was just the regular one, not the rich one. It felt really rich and thick, and I loved how nourishing it was. I loved how bouncy it made my skin feel, but I was never totally convinced that it wasn't aggravating my acne, so I stopped using it. I also feel like compared to other skincare products, I mean, there's like a world of good, inexpensive, plain skincare out there. I feel like you can find something really similar to the Glossier Priming Moisturizer in the K-beauty realm that costs way, way less per ounce. Let's talk about Future Dew. This is a product that I really like. I've gone through almost an entire bottle. Like I'm almost through the bottle that I bought for myself. I really like it because sometimes I have really dry skin, so dry that no makeup looks good on it. Like any makeup, any kind of concealer, any kind of corrector just picks up on the bits of dry skin. I find that Future Dew stays so dewy. It's almost like you've put down a layer of something glossy and damp and tacky on your skin. So it soothes that effect. It makes it so that I can actually wear makeup on my super dry skin without it just picking up on all the dry patches and looking yucky. It also helps treat the skin, like it helps moisturize the skin. So for that reason, I've gotten a ton of use out of it. I've really loved it. The thing about it though is it doesn't set, it's not as sturdy. When my skin's in better shape, I tend to default to more makeup-y illuminators like the one from Auric or the one from Chanel. Okay, let's talk about Super Pure, the niacinamide and zinc serum. I tried all three of the super serums back when they came out. I didn't know that much about skincare at that time, and so I thought it was like the cat's pajamas, you know? I was like, serum all over the place. Since then, I've learned several things about these serums. One, the initial packaging, a half ounce for like $20 or something per serum, or 25, I think. 28. It was like a half ounce for 28. Is that what they initially did? It was so expensive. It was so expensive. Now they've doubled the size of the serum, but like kept the price the same, I think. So it's a way better price per ounce now, but it's still really expensive. $30 for just a little simple niacinamide serum, niacinamide and zinc serum, when you can get the exact same thing from The Ordinary, from the Inkey List. I'm never going to buy them again. So that's Super Pure, the niacinamide and zinc. Niacinamide and zinc is a great like serum. Like that's a great thing to use if you have redness, acne. So I support that. I'm not going to Glossier for that kind of thing. Super Glow, the vitamin C one, I think is the least good decision. Like if you're going to buy serums from Glossier, don't get your vitamin C from them, because it's like, there's so much about vitamin C. It's a little bit unstable. The fresher it is, the better it is. And you know, at the very baseline, it shouldn't be stored in a container that lets light in. And this is just like a frosted glass container. Like light can penetrate this container and spoil the vitamin C. But I'm not even convinced that the vitamin C is in a very effective formulation to begin with in this Glossier serum. I just feel like these serums they're lightweights. You know what I mean? Like they're not serious skincare. They're very basic, and they're charging way too much for what they are. Super Bounce, which is the hyaluronic acid one, I'm sure it's lovely because a hyaluronic acid serum is a great thing to have. But again, if it's just simple hyaluronic acid serum and vitamin B together in one serum, if it's that simple of a product, just 2 ingredients basically, then don't pay $30 for it. Even if it's a full ounce, like get it from the Inkey List or get it from The Ordinary. Let's talk about the masks. All the skincare is at the top. I've tried both masks from Glossier. So the Mega Greens Galaxy Pack is the one that's like a clay mask. I don't tend to get along with clay masks because I have dry skin. This one I actually did enjoy. I actually got along pretty well with this mask. I never felt like it was like pulling all the moisture out of my skin. It always felt like it invigorated my skin just a little bit. I love the smell. I love applying it. In terms of the sensation and everything, it's just really lovely. I don't think though that I saw incredible results from this. I don't think that it was like, I feel like my skin is in bad shape, so I'm going to use the Mega Greens Galaxy Pack and then it's going to be in amazing shape. But it's always good to like apply a simple paste to your face, like especially if you're in the bath, just to apply something to your face to like lock moisture in for a little while, let your skin kind of stew in its juices. Like I think that I got a very basic benefit from this and I enjoyed using it. And I have actually repurchased it a handful of times. The Moisturizing Moon Mask, on the other hand, I actually did see palpable benefits from when I used it. And I repurchased that a bunch of going into my no-buy year, it was like my favorite mask. And I like bought a backup of it, which I never do. I never buy backups. I feel like with the moisturizing moon mask, if my skin was starting to really act up, like I felt like breakouts were imminent, and I applied a thick layer of it and left it on for like an hour or two one evening and then washed it off, and then skincare and bed, I always woke up the next morning with the situation a little bit calmed. I just felt like there was something about the moisturizing moon mask that really helped my skin to calm down. So I do think that that is a really good product. I like both of the masks from Glossier, especially like the moisturizing moon mask. Okay, let's talk about the balm.com. I have tried the balm.com in, I think, just 2 flavors. I had the coconut one initially when, again, like back when Glossier was first new, like back when Glossier was shiny new, and I was like, I'm so into this. I was like, I'm going to buy myself one, and I bought myself the coconut one. It was one of the earliest ones, and I never really liked it. I didn't like the coconut smell. It was such a basic, just salve. Like, it's just like Vaseline. It's like flavored Vaseline, and that is a good occlusive. So, you know, if you put it on top of moisturized skin, it's going to help lock in the moisture, but I never found it to be moisturizing. So like if I had super dry lips and I put it on, it would just sit on top of my lips. It wouldn't like fix the problem. So I'm not a huge balm.com fan. I never feel like I'm actually treating my lips when I apply it or treating any part of my skin. I just feel like I'm putting on an occlusive layer. And the coconut one, I forced myself to get through it. I made myself use it, and I never really loved it. But then years later, I was given the rose one as a gift, and I really like the rose smell, so I find myself appreciating it and using it more, but it's kind of separated in the tube. The balm.com is a big no from me. I have this soothing face mist. This was a gift. I think my friend Simbri had a bottle she wasn't using. She gave it to me. And I really don't like it because I do like the rose smell, and I'm sure it's a perfectly lovely substance, but the sprayer is so fine. It's like that fog mist, and something about the dispersion of the heavily rose scented or rose water based mist in such fine particles, it always makes me cough, which is weird because I don't have like sensitive sinuses or lungs or anything. I'm not a person who often is made to cough by like perfumes or anything like that. But whenever I spray this Glossier rose water spray on my face, I'm like, like it gets all up in my business. And so I actually don't use it as a face spray. I just use it to wet the glycerin soap that I use to set my brows. So like I use it for soap brows instead of water. And in that way, I'm hoping to use it up. So I definitely wouldn't buy it again as a face mist, but it's working perfectly fine, repurposed. The Glossier hand cream, I love the scent of Glossier U, and that's their perfume. And so I really like how it's a very heavily scented, the hand cream is. Every time I use it, Joe is like, what is that? Because he is someone who like heavy scents will sometimes kind of like make him cough or irritate him. So even if I just apply this to my hands, like he'll come into the room 5 minutes later and be like, what did you do? Like, what did you apply? That's how heavily scented it is. So that's not ideal for us, but I really like the smell of it. So I like that it's scented, and the cream is fantastic. It's a really, really good hand cream. When my hands get super dry, it always fixes them. Everything about it is great. I find the packaging to be very strange. It's a weird shape. The weird red nubbin. It's like very avant-garde and also very sexual in this abstract way. Maybe that's in its favor. Everything about it is like either good or super weird, and I feel like that's kind of good. I'm a fan of the hand cream. Okay, next up, ULTRALIP. I just did a full review. If you're interested in the Glossier ULTRALIP and you'd like to know my extensive thoughts and see me try on 4 of the colors, then click through to that video. I'll leave it linked down below. The verdict was that I like it. I actually do really like it, and I ended up wearing the palest one, which is called, what's it called? I don't have time to remember what it's called. The palest one, Lucite. I ended up wearing it a ton on the trip that I just went on. I really have liked Trench a lot too, the brown one. It's a great product. The really bright colors or statement colors are super messy, hard to keep inside your lip line with that. So that's the one caveat, but I do think that they did a good job with the ULTRALIP. It's a yes from me just in general. Boy Brow. I've gone through so many tubes of Boy Brow. Initially, I didn't really know. like what the possibilities were for eyebrows. So I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. I was like, I'm gonna have boy brows, you know? Over time, I realized that it doesn't hold my brows in place. The hold is not strong, and I have kind of stubborn, wiry brows. Right when I brushed it in, it would look great. And then an hour later, they'd be back in their original weird patchy position. So it's just never worked for me. Boy brow is for people who have less high maintenance brows than I do, or they want less out of their brows than what I want. The thing that caused me though to stop buying it initially wasn't that, because I stopped buying it before I realized that I could look elsewhere for a stronger hold. The thing that stopped me was cost per wear. I was going through like a tube a month, and that's $16 a month, like constantly buying it, constantly replacing it. It was just too much. The stretch concealer I also tried back in the day, and it's also something that I wasn't convinced that it wasn't contributing to clogged pores, and so I stopped using it. I think maybe I could revisit it because I've looked at the ingredients. I've examined the ingredients since I've learned more about ingredients and pore clogging ingredients. And I actually think it probably wasn't what was clogging my pores back in the day. I just thought it might have been, so I eliminated it from my routine. It is a beautiful, beautiful concealer. It's a beautiful product. I would like to try it again. I just have other concealers that work perfectly fine. I don't feel the need for more concealers, so I haven't decided to give it another try again. But for anyone who likes skin-like coverage, makeup that really looks like skin but is effective, I would recommend the Glossier Stretch Concealer. I think it's one of the best things that they've ever made. Cloud Paint, also one of the best things that they've ever made. I originally bought Dusk and Beam, and I found Beam to be too orange for me. As I got older and got into my 30s, I started veering away from like those tangerine-y or even any kind of like super peachy cheeks. But Dusk is probably the best blush shade, especially the best liquid blush shade that I've ever seen. It's incredible. It's a liquid formula, goes on seamlessly, blends out perfectly, but sets down and doesn't budge. The thing that I think tells the tale about how good Cloud Paint is that you can use it on your eyelids, and once it sets, it doesn't crease. And so it's really like a stay all day. For something to buff out so beautifully and give you such an effortless watercolor effect and look kind of dewy and skin-like and then not budge all day, it's a unicorn. It's one of a kind. I'm a huge fan of Cloud Paint. Lash Slick, hate it. I can't with Lash Slick. I could only ever get like this tiny little bit. This is their mascara, just a little bit of painted. It was just like painting my eyelashes with black water. It's the opposite of what I like. Like I like mascara to add volume and length. It adds nothing. I mean, I try not to get too dramatic about these things. It's not a big deal. It's just makeup. But part of me feels like a little bit indignant about how badly Lash Slick worked for me. The Perfecting Skin Tint, I really liked for a long time. I used it for a long time. These days I have too many blemishes, like too much to cover to use something so liquidy, so simple. I need a little bit more coverage than that. I'm using a little more base makeup these days than that. But it was like all through grad school, and a little bit after, I used this all the time I would use it as like my only makeup basically. And then I'd do a little bit of spot concealing, maybe a little under eye concealer with the Stretch Concealer. I was a real Glossier complexion girl for a while there. And I never suspected this of breaking me out. There's nothing in it that made me worry about it. The reason that I continued to use it even after I stopped using other Glossier, like the moisturizers, the serums, the concealer, but I ultimately switched it out for a little bit of more heavy duty complexion products and things that just were a little more precise, a little bit better match for my skin. But it's another one that if the purpose is right for you, then I do think it's a great product, and I've recommended it to a lot of my friends, honestly. Generation G, this is the lipstick, which I did buy right when it launched. I think it's gone through a couple of iterations. So I bought the shade Leo right when it launched. It was the first time that I realized how great like a warm brown, a warm sort of mid-toned brown can be as a lip product. And I was really, really into it for a long time. But the problem that I initially had with the formula was that it would be gone in like a minute. So I would apply it and I would love the way that the color looked. It was like it just evaporated. It's not even eating, drinking, talking. It would just like evaporate into thin air. It just didn't stick around. Since they changed the formula and beefed up the packaging, I think it has become something that has a little bit more longevity. But the thinness and the waxiness of it, even though I really love the color, I just find myself almost never reaching for it. I think it's a good product, but my actual actions towards the one that I have, because I have a new version of Leo, the current version, I like it and I think it's a good product, but I almost never wear it. I don't know what else to say about that. The lip gloss I've tried in the clear. What everyone says is true. It's like very glassy and goopy and very satisfyingly shiny. But I found that what I wanted to do was keep applying it and keep getting that like layered glassy look. And I would put so much on that it would just like fall off my lips kind of. And I don't know if that was user error, but I just had a tumultuous relationship with it. It was almost like it promised something and then I tried to get that thing out of it and then it like couldn't deliver. And I ultimately ended up not using up, I used up most of the tube that I had, I think. I used up most of the tube, but I ultimately ended up kind of letting it go and not missing it. The brow flick, little paint on brow pencil, I quite like. It does come in handy sometimes when I just need to fill in a tiny bit of my brows. It's pretty precise, easy to use, and it's pretty waterproof. I think of this kind of thing, it's a really good one. Of this kind of brow pen, it's a really good version of this kind of thing. Because I use soap in my brows, a lot of times like the ink from this kind of thing won't draw over my brows, and because it's like the soap like repels the water-based ink. So I can't use this to like be the thing that I use in my brows all the time, my one and only, my perfect brow product. It's never going to be like that between me and any kind of microfine detailing brow pen. But I'm glad that I have this. I do keep it around. I do use it from time to time as like an around the edges, filling in the little bits helper. Talking about brow flick made me self-conscious about my brows. Moving on, Haloscope. I had Moonstone for a while and it was like one of the first dewy highlight. I feel like this product kind of kicked off the like dewy, balmy, glassy, sparkly cream cheek. Like they were doing it before anyone was doing it. It was one of their earliest products. And it would be great if it didn't have that solid core of balm in the middle. It's like you're applying a beautiful cream highlighter mixed with chapstick to your face. It stays like that all day. It's sticky. It looks really pretty, but I just can't with that. I can't with that sticky cheek. Sky Wash, I actually did try. I tried it in the dark brown shade, which I think is called Echo. It's okay. It's just, I was never able to get the seamless like blend. I find with these liquid eyelid products, and I've never tried Lid Star, the shiny one, but both it and Sky Wash, I don't even like how the models look on the Glossier website. It looks creased in the pictures and it looks like the models had a hard time blending it out. The edges look awkward. I just don't like I like a monochromatic eye, like a monotone sparkly eye or a monotone matte eye in theory, but I just don't like the way that it's achieved with these products. I just don't really think that they blend and set very elegantly. I've never tried Lid Star again. That's my guess based on the pictures, but that was my experience with Sky Wash. Wowder. I am not really a powder person, and I just picked it up one time because I was placing an order with some of my Glossier credit for stuff for review, and I was like, I didn't really have a powder, and I was like, maybe I should just pick this up and see how it works. And then because I've had more acne lately and because of wearing a mask, I've ended up powdering more over the past several months than I ever did before. And I'm so impressed by this powder. I'm actually wearing quite a bit of it today. The other thing is when they first launched it, they didn't have a light enough shade. They didn't have like a shade for people as light as I am. When they increased the shade range to include this like lightest shade, I think that was when I ended up getting it to try. And so because the shade works for me, it's nice that it adds like a teeny tiny bit of coverage. Like it just helps a little bit with calming down the appearance of blemishes, unevenness, and texture, but it is pretty invisible on the skin. I hate the look of powdered skin. It never looks good on me. I mean, powdered skin can look great on people, but it never works for me. But Wowder never gives me that look. I'm actually really impressed by it. I'll probably buy it again when I use it up. Okay, body. I've tried a number of body products from Glossier. The Body Hero Dry Touch Oil Mist was recently in my empties. The oil itself is amazing. It's so lovely. I loved putting it like all over my legs after I got out of the shower. I do have kind of dry skin. It really helped. Everything about it is perfect, except it's a glass bottle with a spray tube. It's almost impossible to use without it slipping all over the place. It's glass. You're in your bathroom. It's about to hit the floor and smash all the time. It was so stressful and I felt dangerous to use. But then I realized that it actually has a screw cap. You don't have to put the spray pump in. So if I ever get it again, I'll just keep it with a screw cap and have the bottle be one that you pour out. That's perfectly fine for it. But the spray on the glass bottle, this oily, slick thing, when you're all wet and steamy in your hot, wet, steamy bathroom, the design is terrible of that. It's just the substance is good. Body Hero exfoliating bar, as exfoliators go, as exfoliating bars go, it's a great one. It's great. It lasts for a long time. As Julia said when we did a video where we reviewed all the body scrubs we've ever tried, it's like taking a bath with a really nice smelling piece of sandpaper. It's very exfoliating with very fine grains, fine sandy grains. You can really go at yourself with it and it smells really good. It smells like Glossier U. It's good. I actually think it's good. I haven't been compelled to get it again since I got it that one time, but for what it is, it's good. The oil wash, again, I really like. I think I feel kind of similarly about all of these products. The oil wash, the exfoliating, and the oil, which is that, the exfoliating bar and the oil, which is that they're really nice. They're just overpriced, I feel. Like, I just feel like the Body Hero exfoliating bar, if it was $10 instead of $14, the dry oil is almost $30. I feel like if that was like $15 or $16, that would be more worth it. And I feel like the oil wash, I don't know, I went through, it's beautiful. It's like this slightly foamy oil that you use to wash your body and it smells really good. I just went through it kind of quickly. I mean, I feel like if it were more like $12 or $13 instead of almost $20, or if it was like a much bigger bottle for the $20, then the cost per use would make a lot more sense to me. But as it is, these feel like really spendy luxuries for this kind of thing, not basics that it makes sense to repurchase again and again. The Body Hero Daily Perfecting Cream, however, this was terrible. I tried it and it's so silicone-y that it pills horribly. I really tried to make it work, but it's like this sort of plasticky feeling, nice smelling cream, and you're rubbing it in and it feels like it's going to be really nice. And then all of a sudden it just pills city, like pills everywhere. That's all I remember. I tried it way back when it first came out. I think that's all that I can say. I remember working really hard to get it to work though. Like, I tried it on dry skin and damp skin, and I tried it in all of these different ways. And the formula is just really, really off. I don't know if they've updated it or anything since then, but the one that they initially launched definitely did not work for me. All right, let's talk about Glossier U, the perfume. It's great. I don't really like fresh things. I like sort of like rich, spicy, smoky, ambery, vanilla-y things. And this doesn't quite have that. It does have warm undertones, but I do like unusual, weirdy, spicy. And so it does have a little bit of like that cedarwood iris thing going on. It's just very comfortable and cozy. It smells addictive without being overpowering. I like it. I feel like it's a good go-to everyday scent. I had a bottle a couple of years ago and I went through the whole bottle. It was like always the scent I wore when I didn't feel like wearing any of my more statement scents. It was sort of my default baseline. I think it's perfectly lovely. Is that everything? I didn't talk about the vanillic lips because they didn't come up on the site because they're discontinued. And the same with the color slide. I've tried both of those, but they're not available anymore. So I guess I'm just reviewing what turned out to be 28 products, if you don't count different colors of things, but 28 products from Glossier that are still available that I've tried because I've been talking for 28 minutes. And I think I did a pretty good job of keeping it to roughly 1 minute. Some things took a little more than 1 minute. Some things took a little less than 1 minute. But overall, I kept it to the 28 minutes for 28 products. Sadie wants to know when Glossier is going to be coming out with their cat line. Glossier Meow. Inquiring cats want to know Glossier. Okay, so these are the two cloud paints that I own. I have Dusk and Puff. And then Glossier also included in the package, when I ordered these bronzers, they included these cloud paint samples. So I'll be able to, one of them is Dusk and one's Puff, but I'll also be able to compare Storm and Dawn. And then I have all of my blushes and bronzers here. I'm not going to be swatching them all, but I'll be able to go through and dig out anything that seems like it's going to come close to any of these as I'm swatching them. Let's start with Volt. When I saw the marketing imagery of these bronzers, I thought that this was basically going to be a blush, and I was kind of horrified. I was like, Glossier has released 3 tan bronzers and 1 blush rather than 4 shades of bronzer. And then when I saw it and I got it, I was actually surprised by the color. It doesn't look as warm to me in person as it looked in the pictures. Here's a really close-up look at the product on the wand. And there's a really close-up swatch. I was expecting that this in person would really just look like a deep burgundy blush, like a deep berry, shimmery berry blush. Now that I see it in person, I can understand more why they're marketing it as a bronzer or why they chose to make a bronzer this color. I pulled up the Fenty Beauty Sunstalker bronzers on my computer, and I'm like looking at the screen right now as I'm looking at this swatch. This color is a dead ringer for the color Mocha Miami in the Fenty Beauty Sunstalker range. So it's the second deepest shade that Fenty came out with in their bronzer range, and it's warm toned. What Glossier did not release is a deep neutral shade. So Mocha Miami by Fenty is described as very deep with warm red undertones. And I'll put a picture of that on the screen right now so you can compare it to the way that this swatch looks. Okay, I keep a pretty edited collection of blush and bronzer. And in fact, to me, blush and bronzer are kind of the same thing. I like a really bronze blush look, and I like a really blushy bronzer look. So I keep everything together, and I tend to just reach for things that are marketed as blushes and things that are marketed as bronzers and even things that are marketed as contours. So I'm just going to swatch anything that I think might be remotely close in color. And I'm even going to stray a little bit from that. I'm going to swatch things that might be somewhat in the same ballpark in case that's what you have. I'm going to just try to swatch as much as I can so that you can compare the colors of the Glossier bronzers to things that you might have put on your face before or have at home to swatch. Okay, there's the solar paint in Volt. And I actually feel like this can make you can see the way that it looks compared to it in the pan. It's not even remotely in the ballpark. I don't think that we need to swatch that. This is the Rituel de Fille Inner Glow Cream Pigment in the shade Eros. It's basically a cool toned brown, so it's much cooler. It's much more taupe than Volt, but it's actually not quite as deep in color as Volt. I don't have very many cheek products that are this deep in color because I myself am so fair. Let's swatch these 2 creams from the e.l.f. Active Lip and Cheek palette. So there's a warm brown and kind of a berry in the e.l.f. Active Lip and Cheek palette. Here's the warm brown. And there's the berry. This is the shade Spice from Salt New York. And just looking in the pan, it looks like it might be the one that has some undertones that match, but I know that this is a much brighter and more sheer color. I'll go ahead and swatch it anyway. I'm going to try to build it up. So that's Salt New York Spice. This is the Lila B Lip and Cheek tint in Be Lovely. Yeah, the shade's called Be Lovely. There's the blush subteal in Mocha Havana Shimmer. We're really departing from the ballpark at this point. We've like left the ballpark. But I want to get some of these bronzy powders down. This is the most bronzy color from this Dior face palette in the shade Glitz. Yeah, also not even in the ballpark. Those might be more relevant swatches next to some of the other Glossier bronzers. But just for the sake of comparison, let's keep going with these. So this is an e.l.f. Putty Blush. And annoyingly, the shade of this is not on the packaging, and I can't remember what shade it is, but I know that I have that information somewhere, so I will look it up. I think it might be Bora Bora, but that could also be totally wrong. I could also be totally wrong. So curiously, it looks kind of similar in the, not super similar, but it looks like it might be close in the pot, but then when it's swatched out, it's definitely a much brighter color. There's Jason Wu Biscotti, much more neutral. There's Patrick Ta, She's So LA, much warmer, much more sheer. This is M Cosmetics Faded Clementine Blush. And this is Melt Blush Light in Sundown. But they're both really warm, kind of bronzy blushes. That's the Merit Blush in Terracotta right there at the bottom. It's also much more pale. And then that right there is the lighter of the two Kjaer Weis bronzers. I always forget the shade name of this Kjaer Weis bronzer. It was a replacement, so the name on the compact doesn't match the product that's inside of it. But Kjaer Weis only makes two shades of bronzer, and this is the lighter of the two shades, the lighter and warmer. So I know that a lot of these aren't even close to being comps for Volt, but again, I wanted to swatch everything that I thought even in anyone's wildest dreams might be remotely in the ballpark, so that you can have some perspective, because maybe of these products you own one, or you own something that you might be able to compare and kind of like get a sense of the reality of what Volt looks like compared to the thing that you know in real life. The last thing that I'm going to do before I wash these off and go to the next shade is give you a more buffed out swatch. That buffed out swatch is really far away from these other swatches. So I'm just picking up some of Volt where I put it down, and I'm going to buff it out here along the edge so you can really compare it to the other things that I've swatched. So again, there is the buffed out swatch of Volt. There is the berry shade from the e.l.f. Active Lip and Cheek palette. This right here is Lila B. Be Lovely. This is Spice from Salt New York right there. And this down here is Jason Wu Biscotti. It's much warmer, but it looks more like the buffed out swatch of Volt than I was expecting it to. And again, this more cool toned, more taupe one right here is Rituel de Fille Eros. Okay, I'm going to leave some of these out because we might want to swatch them again as we move through the other colors. But just to recap with Volt, I've already washed the swatches off, but as you saw, the color of the actual solar paint, the Glossier solar paint in Volt, has more brown in it than, you know, my blushes that are in this realm, like my kind of burgundy and berry blushes, but it's nowhere close to being like that deep neutral shade of bronzer that, for example, is the darkest shade in Fenty's range, Thick Mint. I'll put a picture of Fenty Thick Mint up on the screen. It's much, much more neutral than this, and Glossier just didn't go there with their shade range. Let's look at Heat. Heat is also darker in person than I was expecting it to be based on the advertising imagery from Glossier. I also haven't said this yet because I'm going to talk about the formula later, but they're much less shimmery than I was expecting them to be based on the advertising imagery. So based on the pictures on the Sephora website, this looks to me like Cocoa Naughty in the Fenty Beauty bronzer range. The Fenty listing says that Cocoa Naughty is deep with neutral undertones, and this actually also looks a bit warm to me. It doesn't look as red toned as Volt, but it does look warm. I wouldn't necessarily call this neutral, especially when it's buffed out. You're gonna get that warmth. You're gonna get that almost blushy warmth. Buffed out, you can see that it has some sheen. When it's on the cheeks, it definitely looks, it's like the sheen not of a highlighter or of a luminous blush, but of a matte product applied over a luminous primer. So I feel like it's sort of a a blended into the skin kind of sheen. But none of these are as highlighting as I was expecting them to be. Okay, here I have some comparisons, and I actually do have some products that are comparable in color to the way that heat looks when it's blended out. Although none of my comparable products could be built up to the level of depth that you can build this up to. And most of mine are peachier as well. I think that the Rituel de Fille is obviously still the most cool toned of everything that I have. But I think that after that, Heat is going to be the least peachy. Like, this is definitely the least peachy of everything that's here. That's the Rituel de Fille Cream Pigment in Eros. Then I think that Heat is probably the second least peachy. And these four are, I think that probably Patrick Ta... Oh no, this is Patrick Tashi Soleil. What's this? This is the swatch from the e.l.f. Active Lip and Cheek, the brown. That's the third least peachy. And then Patrick Tashi Soleil, which is down here, the Kjaer Weis bronzer, which is right there, and this is Biscotti from Jason Wu right there. They're all more peachy. None of them is exactly quite peach. You know what I mean? They're all kind of like a bronzy color, but they're peachier than Heat, and they're all much peachier than the Inner Glow Cream Pigment. So just to go through the list again, in case you kind of lost track of which one was which, on the top we have a thick swatch of Glossier Solar Paint in Heat. The second one down is a buffed out swatch of Glossier Solar Paint in Heat. The third one down is this Kjaer Weis bronzer. It's the lightest of the Kjaer Weis bronzers. The fourth one down is Biscotti, which is the Jason Wu Hot Fluff. The fifth one down is the Inner Glow Cream Pigment in the shade Eros. The sixth one is the brown from the e.l.f. Active Lip and Cheek palette. And on the bottom, we have the cream blush from Patrick Ta She's So LA. Let's take a look at Ray. This looks really orange to me. And I'm someone who doesn't really like blushes that lean orange, and I like things to be more neutral. So I feel like this is the one that has the most yellow in it of all of them. The other ones are kind of getting their warmth from more of a red undertone. And this one seems to have more of a yellow or orange undertone. Yeah, it has that kind of camel color. Okay, so there we have a thick swatch of Glossier Solar Paint in Ray, and we have a more buffed out swatch. So I kind of want to know what it looks like next to M Cosmetics Faded Clementine blush. The blush is peachier, and it doesn't have that like camel undertone. Here's the Melt Sun or Blush Light in Sundown. It's also got more of like a gold, almost like a NARS Orgasm, like gold and peach. So this is more yellow than that kind of thing. Maybe more like this bronzy highlighter from Dior. Even this bronzy highlighter from the Dior Glitz palette is looking more peach than the Solar Paint. And yeah, I can guarantee that Jason Wu Biscotti, oh yeah, it looks positively pink. It looks positively mauve by comparison. Let's look at Merit's Terracotta Blush. Also looking really peach by comparison. Maybe the e.l.f. I bet this e.l.f. blush is going to be the closest dupe. That's definitely the closest dupe that I have, but it's also warmer. It's also warmer and peachier in undertone. I love this blush when I really, really sheer it out. I really like wearing that as a blush. And I am probably not going to be able to get Ray to work for me like that because it's got that really kind of camel-y, yellowy undertone. I think this is one that I probably won't be able to wear. And just for good measure, here's Patrick Ta, She's So LA, although we already know that that's going to be more on the peachy side. And let's check it out next to the Kjaer Weis bronzer. So again, in case you've lost track of which swatch is which, the top swatch here is the Kjaer Weis bronzer. The second one is the brown from the e.l.f. Active Lip and Cheek palette. The third one is a thick swatch of Glossier Solar Paint in Ray. The fourth one is the buffed out swatch of Ray. The fifth swatch here is M Cosmetics Faded Clementine Blush. The sixth one is the Melt Blush Light in the shade Sundown. And the next one underneath that is the bronzy shade from the Dior Face Palette in Glitz. This cream swatch right here is Jason Wu Biscotti. Then we have the Merit Blush in Terracotta. And lastly, the cream from Patrick Ta, She's So LA. I don't own any cheek products with as warm and kind of camel-y an undertone as Ray, and that might be because I don't own very many bronzers, and the ones that I do tend to lean quite peachy because when I get sun, I get peachy. Lastly, let's look at Flare. To me, it looks tan. And it does look like it has a little bit of opaque, milky pigment in it. All right, we definitely want to swatch this next to the lightest shade of contour from Salt New York. It's actually kind of similar. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good comp. I feel like the Salt New York shade is more neutral. You can see when you compare them that Flare from Glossier is leaning just a little bit on the warm, like a little bit on the peachy side. But those are very close. Let's also look at Merit Terracotta with this. Much peachier. I feel like we're going to run into the same thing that we did with the other shade. It's like everything's going to be slightly peachier. There's Jason Wu Biscotti. It's definitely deeper. But the only thing that I can think of on site that this reminds me of that I own is Glossier Dusk. So I feel like we should skip right to swatching these solar paints all next to each other and swatching them next to the Glossier Cloud paints. But just a quick recap, here we have Glossier Solar Paint in Flare swatched thickly, Glossier Solar Paint and Flare buffed out. The lightest shade of contour from Salt New York. I can't remember what the shade name is, but I'll definitely link it down below. Here we have Merit Blush in Terracotta. This is Jason Wu Biscotti, and this is the cream blush from Patrick Ta, She's So LA. You know what else I want to swatch next to this, though? Clinique Nude Pop. I feel like for some people, this is sort of like the standard, very, very pale cheek. But it is much pinker. It's much pinker than Glossier Flare. All right, I'm going to clean all of this up and we'll get to swatching the Glossier cream products all next to each other. So on top there is the Glossier Cloud Paint in Storm, and underneath it is the Glossier Solar Paint in Volt. And there's Dawn, which is nothing like any of these, but just as a point of reference. Puff is also not really like any of these. But there it is. Okay, so here we have Cloud Paint in Puff on top, Cloud Paint in Dawn, Cloud Paint in Storm, Then we have all 4 of the bronzers. So Volt, Heat, Ray, and Flare. And then on the bottom, Glossier Dusk, which looks a lot less like Flare than I was expecting it to. It's just definitely much peachier. There's Storm blended out, that's the Glossier Cloud Paint, and there's Volt, the solar paint blended out. I want you to just blend them both out a little bit because I feel like that's one of the things that I thought when I saw the imagery of the release. I saw Volt and I was like, that looks just like Glossier Storm, but maybe with a little bit of shimmer in it. Blending them out, you can kind of see the difference in the tones. And then there's the same thing with Glossier Cloud Paint in Dusk and Glossier Solar Paint in Flare. So you can see that once again, Dusk, it's just, you know, it's more of a blush color. It's more pink, and Flare is more orange. And while we're at it with Flare, let's go ahead and talk about application, and I'll roll the footage of myself applying Flare to my cheeks this morning. It applies flawlessly. I mean, the Glossier Cloud Paint is one of my all-time favorite makeup formulas. It's truly flawless to me. And I think that, I think what they did was that they just put a tiny bit, just a tiny, tiny bit of shimmer. Again, I don't think of these as like highlighting bronzers or glowy bronzers really. They just buff out with a little bit of a sheen, almost as if you've applied them over a glowy primer. I think they just put a little bit of sheen into the Cloud Paint formula and came up with 4 new colors and called it a day, or called it a bronzer, called it a solar paint. To me, they feel and apply and buff out exactly like Glossier Cloud Paint, and that makes me think that they are exactly like Glossier Cloud Paint, which is great. Like, that's fine with me. I'm glad that that's what they did. That's what I would have hoped that they would do. I like to apply Cloud Paint with a brush, so that's what I did. You'll see in the footage that I buffed it out. You'll see the sheen. It has a pretty decent sheen, but again, it's not something you can see from space. They look and feel and apply to me kind of like a cross between a matte and a glowy cheek. Like, I feel like it ends up being more of a satin look and less of a glowy look. Whereas again, from all of the marketing imagery, I was led to believe that we were going to get a really, really glowy cheek from this. With regards to the color of Flare, which is, you know, definitely the one of the 4 that suits me best, it still looks kind of orange on me. I think you'll be able to see that in the footage. I personally prefer Dusk. For me, I feel like Dusk is my ideal bronzer color, and I would love it if they made a shade lighter in the solar paint that had a little bit more warmth to it and also had the slight shine. That would be like my perfect cream bronzer. The shade range is limited, as Glossier's shade ranges often are, especially when they first launch. If you're like me and you're very pale and you like a slightly rosy bronzer, like a blushy bronzer, then there's not really going to be something here for you. I would actually recommend Dusk instead. And if you have very dark skin and you prefer a neutral bronzer rather than something very, very red toned, then there's not something here for you either. In the in-between, between the kind of like warm ruddiness of Heat and the very camel colored sort of like yellow undertone of Ray, I would hope that these 2 shades can cover quite a wide range of people who fall in the middle. But when it comes to the lightest shade and the deepest shade, they definitely went all in on a single undertone. So I feel like they went all in on kind of an orangey undertone for the lightest shade, or like a tan, like a beigey, tanny orange, and they really went all in on a very red undertone for the deepest shade. The formula is very good, which makes me hope that they will expand the shade range in the future, because it would be lovely to see something comparable, for example, to Thick Mint from Fenty in this formula. I have Clay and Teak. I personally really like this kind of color for a monochromatic eye, and I wanted to compare these 2 to each other. And then I have Jute and Prairie. These both struck me as being distinctive in some way. I was curious about them, so I included them in the review as well. And here is the list of questions that I'm going to answer. Question number 1, what do I think of the concept of a monochromatic trio like this from Glossier? Question number 2, What is the packaging like in real life? Number 3, what do the colors look like in real life? 4, what are the formulas like to touch and swatch? And I have really good overhead footage of myself touching and swatching all of these shadows. Question 5, how do the formulas perform on the eyes? And then at the end, my final thoughts. Question number 1, what do I think of the concept? I talked a little bit about this before I had these. I talked about this release in one of my new makeup videos, new makeup hot takes, but I'll reiterate what I said there. I don't think that it's a bad idea. I personally really love a monochromatic look. I am able to create an eye look using shadows that are the same color but have different finishes. I do that sometimes. I think that some people don't. I've seen some people reviewing this and just being like, there's nothing that I can really do with this because I can't create any depth. I can't create structure, create dimension if there isn't like at least one slightly darker shade or at least one slightly lighter shade. I've seen some people saying that they feel like it was a mistake to put 3 colors in a palette that are essentially tonally exactly the same. I do understand that. I think that it's a really legitimate critique. And I think that if you know yourself and whenever you do eyeshadow, you always reach for something a little bit darker for the outer corner, you always reach for something lighter for the inner corner or to pop on the lid, then this will frustrate you because with most of these, they are exactly the same color. Like they blend into each other and you can't see where one leaves off and the other begins, apart from the subtle shifts in texture, which we'll get to later. There's nothing distinguishing one shadow from another. They're the same color. I think that that's more true for some of these trios than others, but that is true of some of them, and it is the baseline idea. Like that's the concept. And I personally don't have a strong quarrel with the concept. I feel like there is a place for that because I really like an eye look that is truly all one color, that kind of has that effortlessness of not looking like you did anything to build structure. Smidge, are you gonna be squeaking through the whole video? You want to be together? She just piped up. And then she curled back up and went back to sleep. Maybe she was saying that there's nothing wrong with a monochromatic eye look because she just wears one color every day. So this is just to say that I feel like conceptually it's something that isn't going to work for everyone, but I don't think that it's such a bad idea that it shouldn't be on the market. I think that in theory, it's a good idea and is something that could work for a lot of people, me included. I also personally really love texture. I like variety in texture kind of even more than variety in color. So the idea of a release of eyeshadow trios that really elevate texture as being the main thing that distinguishes eyeshadows from each other, rather than color as the main thing that distinguishes eyeshadows from each other, is appealing because usually it's color. It's like, here's this color story that we're giving to you. And basically they're saying like, here's a little texture story. For each one of these colors, you get a little texture story. As a makeup lover, as someone who does a lot of different kinds of eye looks, I'm not mad at that. And I also think that there is potentially an application for an entire demographic of people who are a little bit intimidated by the idea of figuring out where to place each specific color, like a light color and a dark color, how to make them work together to create structure. If you're in a place where you want to wear eyeshadow, but you're kind of intimidated by that, but you want some variety, you don't just want one and you put it all over the lid and that's it, then this is potentially for you. So this is to say that I wasn't as skeptical out of the gate as I think some beauty lovers were of this release. And what I said in my new makeup hot takes video is that it would be the performance of these shades on the eyes that would tell the tale about whether I ultimately think that it's a good release. And that's what I'm going to go on to tell you about in this video. Question number 2, what is the packaging like in real life? There's been a lot of talk about how weird it is that it looks like there's space for 4 shadows and then they only included 3. It doesn't bother me as much as it bothers some people. The way I see it, I think that what probably happened is that they wanted to release trios. They wanted to do matte satin and metallic, or matte satin and reflective, or whatever they're calling this third one. And then they went from that jumping point and tried to come up with a physical shape that would house 3 shadows. So they were thinking like, what kind of setting could we put 3 shadows into that would be attractive, that would be modern, that would be different? And they didn't want to go with round, separated into kind of like 3 pie chart shapes. And they eventually settled on a square compact and they didn't want to do bars. They wanted squares and they were messing around and they eventually arrived here and they were like, oh, this is different. There's something a little bit edgy about it. It's asymmetrical. And then they just went with it, failing to think about the way that it would present to consumers who are kind of looking at it from the other direction. Like as a consumer, you see the packaging first and you open it up and it's like, why are there only 3? So I think that they made a mistake because it's striking a lot of people as being awkward and frustrating. And it's causing a lot of people to say, like, why are they withholding the 4th shade from us? Why didn't they include a glitter? Why didn't they include XYZ? But I kind of understand how it happened. And I don't have that thing where I look at this and I'm like, I can't take it. It rips my soul apart because it's asymmetrical, you know? That aspect of it doesn't bother me personally. I feel like I can meet them halfway, but I do think it was a mistake. If they had asked me about it, I would have advised them against it. Moving on from that aspect of the packaging, I feel like aesthetically, it's okay. It gets a like middling grade from me. It feels a little bit clunky. I feel like there's empty space in here underneath the panel that pops out. This panel is removable, and then this is just like a tin box, which maybe they're thinking people are going to want to use it as a tin box after they use up their eyeshadows. So they made it a little bit deeper so that you can fit stuff in there. But just, I don't know why. I just feel like that's not a reason to make packaging clunkier than it needs to be and make it take up more space than it needs to take up. And that's how I feel about this. I just feel like it could be slimmer. It could have a slimmer profile than this. It could be like half as slim as this, much more svelte feeling. And as it is, it feels a little bit like a vintage tin lunchbox. That's partly because it is that same kind of tin, which I don't have an issue with. On the contrary, I actually think that aspect of it is great. I'll get to that in a second. But you know, that aside, like the sustainability issue aside, I feel like they could have used this same material and just made something that wasn't so chunky and clunky. I guess you could argue that that's a matter of taste, but I've heard so many people time and time again complain about chunky packaging in reviews of makeup and say that they like things to be svelte. They like palettes to feel streamlined. And I am that way too. And I've said that so many times. And I've never heard anyone out there being like, I like a thick, chunky palette. I like something to feel like it's hefty. I mean, I know we like things to feel heavy, to feel luxurious, to not feel like it's just a tissue. But I've never heard someone being like, I like that this is, you know, 3/4 of an inch thick. I like a thick palette. People don't say that. So if it's a matter of taste to prefer something like this to be kind of svelte, then I feel like it's a taste that a lot of us share. Of course, I think it's fantastic that they are modeling replaceable pans, a little bit more of a sustainable option than a lot of what's on the market right now. I think that that's fantastic. I like that this outer box is tin, but this insert is made of plastic. I just kind of feel like at this point, there's no excuse for plastic in makeup packaging. Plastic is destroying the earth. And so if you're going as far as to be like, oh, we made the outer box out of tin, could you not figure out something for this insert that isn't plastic either? They get points for trying, and I do think that it's important to model ideas like this in the industry so that other brands kind of like have a starting point. They're like, well, Glossier did it. Maybe we won't do it in exactly the same way, but it's clearly an appealing idea. You know, I mean, that's fine, but they don't get full marks for sustainability because they didn't do the most, right? They did something, but they didn't do the most. Even if the plastic insert inside is in theory fully recyclable, that's not enough anymore. We have to stop making stuff out of plastic. If you're a manufacturer and you're designing something from the ground up, there shouldn't be plastic in it. And I know that there's plastic in a lot of makeup packaging, and I review a lot of makeup that's packaged in plastic, and I don't talk about it every time. I'm talking about it today because there's a lot of buzz about sustainability around this packaging specifically. It is a problem anytime a brand makes a piece of makeup packaging out of mostly plastic or entirely out of plastic. I'm not saying that this plastic insert is more of a problem than the plastic in all of the other makeup packaging. I just wanted to mention it. I feel like it's particularly relevant to this review. And maybe I'll start mentioning it every single time. I would love to see more brands making an effort like this, and I would love to see all brands making even more of an effort than this. Let's move on to talking about something less grim. What do the colors look like in real life? They look gorgeous. This is the one thing, spoiler alert, we're kind of getting into it now. This is the one thing that I think that they did well. To me, these 4 colors that I am reviewing look exactly the way that they look on the site. There were no surprises in terms of how the color looks. Actually, I might say that this one, Jute, one of the reasons that I got it was that it's so pale. It's hard to tell with shades like this if they're going to show up or if they're just going to look really, really, really pale and completely disappear. And they have more depth, a little bit more presence than I thought that they would, which is good. I was hoping for that. I was hoping that I would be able to put this shade all over my lids and get some depth instead of just having the entire lid kind of blanked out. And it is buildable enough and it is deep enough that I'm able to get some depth. So that was probably the only real question that I had about color where I was like, oh, I really can't tell online what I'm buying. And that's the answer to that question. And everything else just looks exactly like I was expecting it to look. The shade range I really like. I love the neutrality of some of these shades. I love the balance of tones and undertones. There were a lot of shades that I was drawn to. It was hard for me to choose just 4. And I was excited by each one of these 4 compacts. When I got them and I opened them and I started swatching them and looking at the colors, I was excited by the way that the colors look in real life for each one of them. I feel like color selection is a really positive aspect of this launch, the most positive aspect, and maybe the only unmitigatedly positive aspect of this launch. Okay, question number 4. What are the formulas like to touch? How do these shadows feel when you touch them, and how do they swatch? You'll see in the overhead footage, they swatch pretty well. They swatch pretty well. When I first swatched them, and I filmed that overhead footage before I had played with them on my eyes because I wanted you to see the untouched pans. So the overhead footage that you're seeing, that's footage of my first encounter with these shadows in person. And after swatching them, I was pretty optimistic because they look pretty good. I will say that when I was swatching them for the first time, one of the things that I noticed is that the coordinating shades across palettes are inconsistent with each other. So the metallic formula feels much more pigmented and creamier in some of these quads than in others. And that's unfortunate because it means that I can only speak to the shades that are in these 4. If the metallic formula, for example, was exactly the same in terms of pigmentation and intensity and feel across all 4 of these, I would feel like I was giving you a review of the entire line. But as it is, I feel pretty confident that I'm only able to review these 4 quads because they're inconsistent with each other, especially the metallic formulas and the satin formulas. These 4 satins are kind of different from each other, and the 4 metallics that I have are kind of different from each other. I am going to try to give you like a shotgun review of each of these individual shades. Quad by quad, I'll go through shadow by shadow, but I'm going to do that at the end after I talk about playing with them and putting them on my eyes, because I feel like the way that they perform on the eyes actually matters more when it comes to that kind of eyeshadow by eyeshadow review. But before I even put them on my eyes, I was already aware of the inconsistencies. For example, I'll give you one example. The metallic in Clay, which is like this rich, ruddy color, and it's the darkest of these 4 quads. The metallic in here is pretty creamy, and it's also very pigmented. Like, it's got a punch, and I feel like I could easily use this to build depth in the outer corner of a different eye look, for example. You can't really build depth in the outer corner with this quad because it's exactly the same color as the other ones. But this is a rich, creamy, pigmented, dark eyeshadow. The metallic in Prairie, on the other hand, which is also kind of a strong color. You know what I mean? It's not as though this is a pastel or something, but the metallic in Prairie is just a little bit weak sauce. It's dusty, it sort of fades around the edges, and it's drier to the touch. I think that all of these shadows, all 12 of them, are a bit drier than I was expecting them to be, a bit thinner than I was expecting them to be. Probably the 2 shades that interested me the most when I was swatching are the metallic from Jute, because you'll see in the overhead swatches that It's pretty bright and shiny. I was impressed by the way that it looked in the swatch. I was like, whoa, that really packs a punch. And I love that. I love a really shiny metallic like that. I was hoping that it would be spangly and really rich as a topper. But even more than that, I think my absolute favorite of these 12 is the Satin in Teak. You know, I love this shade. I love this color, this kind of like camel. It's like a slightly mustardy camel. And I love an eyeshadow that has a little bit of a wet look, satiny sheen like that. It looks incredible on my finger right there, and it looks incredible in the swatch. But even this one, which is the one that I was the most excited about when I was swatching them, even this, it just feels a little thin and a little bit dry. There's just not much bite to it. The mattes all swatched pretty well, and because I love these tones, I love the colors, I was pretty excited to work with the mattes after having swatched them. But the main thing that I have to say about the experience of touching and swatching them, the main tale that told is that these shades are inconsistent. I was swatching through and it wasn't like, whoa, these satins are amazing. It was like 1 out of the 4 satins, the one in Teak, was one where I was like, oh, that looks great. I can't wait to use that. 1 out of the 4 shimmers, this one, I was like, that's the kind of metallic shine that I like. And even though the metallic in Clay is very rich, it's so pigmented that it swatched more like a satin and looked more like a satin, not like something I would consider to be a metallic. So I had a very different impression of the metallic in this than I did of the metallic in this. They just don't seem to have the same formula. Or more likely what is happening is that they do have the same formula, but the different pigments that they put in to make the color different, the pigments really changed the formula, the way that the formula works. And maybe they didn't adjust the rest of the ingredients in the formula to account for the way that each of the pigments was going to affect them. I was still optimistic after swatching. The swatches looked pretty good. And so I sat down that very evening and I started playing with these on my eyes. And I was really surprised by how it went, especially after having looked at the swatches. I immediately started to experience frequent moments of frustration and surprise when trying to get these eyeshadows to do what I thought that they were going to do based on the way that they looked and based on the way that they swatched. Oh, Smidge, you're coming to see me? You want to be in the video? Sometimes Smidge just needs to be together because she's such a baby. She's such a tiny baby. You want to show them how much you've grown? Can you believe how much she's grown in just 2 weeks? When I found her, she was so tiny she could fit in the pocket of my bathrobe. And now there's no way. There's no getting her in there. I compiled a list of things that frustrated me about working with these eyeshadows. And I'm going to go through the list and speak on each one of the items on the list. And then I'll show you the footage of myself applying the eye look that I'm wearing today. And I'll try to kind of talk through the way in which I was able to get, because clearly it's fine. You know what I mean? Like the look is fine. I'll talk to you about what went well today when I was putting this look on, what's good about it, and what isn't good about it. And we may be in for some general chaos with Smidge on the loose. She just took her little paw and pushed something off of my desk, and that's the first time she's done that. I feel like there's no going back from that. So the very first thing I noticed on the first night is that it's hard to get these shadows to layer. They don't want to stick to each other, stick to themselves, which is so weird because the entire concept is like, use these 3 together, layer them, combine them, blend them into each other to get a look that's monochromatic but has 3 different textures. The first thing that I did when I was playing with these is I put the satin from Jute all over my lids, and I was surprised that it gave me some depth. I liked the color, as I said before. And then I went into the metallic because, again, it's so shiny, it's swatched so shiny, and I wanted to put that on my inner corner and sort of drag it across my lid on top of the satin, which is something I do all the time when I'm doing eyeshadow. And I also wanted to blend it on my brow bone and kind of get that sort of shiny, glossy, blown out look. I put it on my finger, I started pressing it on my inner corner, and it wouldn't stick. It wouldn't stick on top of the satin. Sometimes a metallic shadow or a shiny shadow has a hard time sticking on top of a matte. I would have understood that better if that was the issue, but it wasn't even sticking on top of its friend, the satin, in the same color. Like it wouldn't stick at all. It was like trying to put down dust. I went in with a brush, I tried to blend it, it just blended away. And then I tried to put it underneath my brows and it stuck better on bare skin, but it didn't really want to play with the rest of what was on my eyes there either. I had a hard time blending them together. There was a lot of dusting away, and that really intense shine that I saw in the swatching of it just was nowhere to be found. I just could not get it to look like that on my lids. It just looked dusty. It looked like a mediocre satin. And the satin kind of looked like a matte once it was on my eyes. Then I went into the matte and I started using it to blend, and it was fine, but it's just like, because the metallic looked like a satin and the satin looked like a matte, the matte didn't look like anything. It didn't change anything about what was on my lids. So it all ended up blending together with the metallic pretty much blending away completely. And it basically ended up looking like a monochromatic, essentially matte eye look. Like it looked like I had put this all over my lids, even though I had used all three of them. So the first thing on my list of frustrations is that it's hard to get them to layer. In the same vein, the second thing on my list is that some of the metallics are dustier even than they swatch, especially, again, the one from Jute and the one from Prairie. I just found the metallics in these two compacts to just, it's hard to get them to build. It's hard to get them to apply with a brush. The brush can pick them up, but then when you start putting them on, they kind of dust away. These two metallics, the sort of rich, warm browns, they're pretty pigmented and they do stick pretty well. And it's easier to get them to stick on top of other shadows from their same trios. But it's weird. They're so pigmented that they kind of like take over, and they also become less shiny as you blend them out. The third thing on my list is that the metallics and satins are much, much less shiny on the eyes than they swatch. So it appears that even the metallics in this range that don't have the dustiness issue, they do become a little dusty in terms of like their finish once they're applied. And so where does that leave the mattes? It's like there's no reason to have mattes in here. I did sometimes find myself dipping into them to buff out the edges of something or to try to deepen up the outer corner. But again, because these shadows are the exact same color as each other, matte shadow doesn't really create that much depth, if any, when the entire rest of the look is looking like a sort of satiny matte version of the exact same color. It would have no effect. If anything, I feel like the metallic is a better bet in some of these for deepening up the outer corner because it's a little bit darker, if anything. If I were going to build an eye look out of this and I wanted dimension, I would put the matte all over my lid and I would use the metallic in my outer corner because it has a little more depth. So that's weird. It's not thoughtful. It doesn't have the actual creation of dimension and structure on the eyes in mind. It is, I think, a structural issue, an engineering issue, but the weirdest part, the worst part, the deal breaker is that the shadows don't seem to play well with each other. In each trio, they don't seem to work with each other. They don't layer. They repel each other in some cases. The best case scenario is that they blend so thoroughly into each other and that these three disparate finishes end up looking so weirdly similar to each other that you can't tell the difference between any of them on the eyes. And you're just like, why am I working with three different eyeshadows when I could get the same look with just one and probably have a better experience with just one. Let me talk you through the application of this eye look today, and perhaps it will illustrate even further the point or points that I'm trying to make. So today I started with my favorite of all 12 of these shades, which is the satin in the teak quad. I really like this color. The only thing that I really like about this entire situation is this color. And if I keep any of these, which I probably won't, but if I do, it'll be this one, and I'll keep it simply because I find this color to be beautifully balanced, and I haven't really been able to find an exact dupe for it in my pretty extensive, for me, eyeshadow collection. So I went in with the satin, I put it all over my lids with my finger, which is how I often begin an eye look, and then I went in with a brush and I tried to blend it out. It didn't blend very well. It was kind of hard to get those edges buffed out. It's kind of a thin shadow, so it stuck just where I put it on my lids with my finger, and then I couldn't get the brush to diffuse the edges of it the way that I can with almost any other eyeshadow in my collection, frankly. When I went dipping the brush into the pan, I was able to get a little bit softer of a blend on the edges, applying more and more of the eyeshadow. I was able to kind of make softer shapes on the lid, which is like the base from which I like to start. Then I went in with a matte, and I used the matte to perfect the shape and to buff the edges out even further, just to show you what it looks like when that happens. Hopefully you'll be able to see in the footage that it didn't look different. Like putting the matte on the outer corner and up on the brow bone and using it to finish the outer edges of the shape of this eyeshadow on my eyes, I could have just gone and continued with the satin. It made no difference that I went to the matte. That's partly because they're exactly the same color, but it's mostly because the finish isn't that different between the two of them. There just isn't really a palpable difference between using one and using the other. If anything, I struggled a little bit to get the matte to fully stick in the outer corner and really create that depth, because again, it's flatter. And so it seemed like there was actually some depth, just a teeny bit of depth in the application of the satin that wasn't there with the matte. So even though we usually default to mattes for the outer corner, the matte was the least effective of these three shades at doing what I want a shadow to do in the outer corner. It was fine for buffing out the edges of the look, but it just didn't add anything. Then I went into the metallic. And again, I really like this color. I like the tone. So I really like this shade. I like that it has this kind of caramel, camel-y warmth without leaning too orange. But when I applied it to my lids, as you'll see, it just didn't look that shiny. It just doesn't look that shiny. The fact that it's a slightly more textured formula, I feel like makes it a little bit richer and stickier in this case than either of the other two. Unlike Jute and Prairie, which have dustier metallic formulas, this one's a little richer and thicker. So you can see it applied really well to my inner corner and to the middle of my lid. It stuck pretty well, but then it just blended into the other two and looked exactly the same as them. Especially after I went in with a brush and blended it in, it just looked exactly the same. And I like the look that I ended up with. I mean, this frankly is one of my favorite kinds of eye looks to do, truly. Like I really like the way that my eyes look today. So I can't discount that. Like I have to tell you, I'm really into it. I like this better than any eye look I've done for like a couple of weeks. Like I'm really actively into it. I'm not just cool with it. I'm not just not mad at it the way it ended up looking. I love it. I love the way that it ended up looking. But I pretty firmly believe that I could have gotten it to look like this just using the satin only, or just using the metallic only. I think that if I used the satin all over one eye and the metallic all over the other and didn't touch the matte, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between my two eyes. I should have done that as an experiment today. I'm sorry I didn't. But I'm pretty confident that that would be the case. And hopefully you'll be able to see in the footage why I say that. And that just, to me, that's a fail. That's a fail. It's like they put three eyeshadows into a trio and it could just be one. Like they could mix them all together. And that means that you don't gain any value by switching from one to the other when you're doing your eye look. If anything, the fact that they don't stick to each other all that well and don't layer that well means that it makes it harder to get a good eye look if you use more than one of these at a time. If I keep this, I will only ever use one at a time. I'll probably just use the metallic most of the time all over the lids as a monochromatic look because it has a little bit more texture. And so it's the one of these three that I like to work with the most. Even though I like the way that the satin swatches the most, the metallic ends up looking on the eyes the way that the satin looks on my finger. And that's true of all of them. If you are interested in one of these because you really love the color, or if you have bought one and you're kind of looking for a tutorial, my advice is to just use one of these eyeshadows at a time. Do you want an all matte look or do you want an all shimmer look? I mean, none of them is really an all shimmer look. It's like, do you want an all matte look? If you do, use the satin. If you want an all satin look, you should use the metallic. And I don't know what the mattes are for because the satins look matte. So that brings me to the next section of the video, the biggest issue in a nutshell. This is the biggest issue in a nutshell. Even though I like the concept of a monochromatic quad that has three textures, it turns out that in practice with these formulas, it's difficult to get depth on the eyes, not because of the tonal similarities between the three shades, not because they're the same color, but because of the textural similarities. Because the textures actually don't vary that much from each other on the eyes. I have all 3 textures on my eyes today, and they just aren't that different from each other. I feel like if 3 shades in a little trio are all going to be the same color, the textures have to vary wildly and they have to play well with each other. And as it is, at least with these 4 quads that I've been testing, they do not. The textures do not vary wildly, and they also don't play well with each other. I feel like the idea would have worked if the satins were very creamy and smooth, almost like cream to powder, and the metallics were super high voltage, or even if the metallics were kind of like flaky, semi-sheer glitter toppers, or like flaky mica toppers. If the metallics were ultra shiny, ultra light reflective, and the satins were really creamy, and then the mattes were like the only truly matte option, then the idea would have worked. I hate to say this because it sounds really mean, but this is my honest assessment. It feels like these were designed by somebody who doesn't like eyeshadow, like who doesn't like wearing. It feels like they were designed by a team of people, none of whom really like eyeshadow. It's like it feels like the idea is abstract and the execution of them is disconnected from the actual act of applying pigmented powders to one's eyes, blending them out, and wearing them around. It feels like the person or persons who conceived of this and then saw it through to its execution never intended to wear it on their own eyes and have no desire to wear it on their own eyes. They were just trying to take a guess at what kind of eyeshadow palette or delivery of powder eyeshadow would appeal to Glossier's customers. And because they were trying to take a guess at that, I understand the decisions that they made in that context, but it just feels like they guessed and hoped for the best. It's like there isn't any heart. There isn't heart in it. So can they still work for you? Can one of them work for you? Say you're really into one of the colors and you're like, please just throw me a bone and let me know that it's possible to make them work. Yeah, I think that they can work for you. I think that these potentially work best for someone who asks very little of eyeshadow. And again, I reiterate, I personally think that the best way to wear these is to wear one shadow at a time, to just pick one of the eyeshadows and use it only and put it all over your lids. Like each one of these is a compact that contains 3 different monochromatic eye looks. And they're not that different from each other, but maybe there's a subtle difference. And each time you can just pick which of the monochromatic eye looks you want to wear. But it's not just a monochromatic look, it's like a mono shadow look. And there are 3 of them that you can get. I think that that's your best bet. But there are hundreds of other eyeshadows that I would reach for before any of these 12 to get a look like that. Final thoughts. Of course, there are going to be people out there who love these. I'm sure that there are people who love them. And frankly, I wouldn't even go so far as to totally discourage you from getting one if you find that you have a passionate interest in this, or if you just have a passing interest in Glossier, if you're already, say you're placing an order like to replace your hydrating moon mask and your brow flick, and there's one of these colors that really appeals to you and you're thinking about adding it into your cart, the price is not awful for what you get. And it's fun, the Glossier experience is fun. The packaging is very polished. It's fun to sort of like see what they're up to. And your experience might be different from mine, especially if you don't already have a vast collection of eyeshadow like I do. Or maybe your requirements are really different from mine. Maybe you're in high school and you're just dipping your toes into eyeshadow and you just want to try one shadow all over your lids. If you buy one of these quads, you'll have 3 versions of that. Or maybe you're 55 years old and you're just getting into eyeshadow, just dipping your toes in, and you want the same thing. Then this could be a place to start. But my professional opinion as someone who owns a lot of eyeshadow and really loves eyeshadow is that these formulas are disappointing. Unlike other reviewers, the concept didn't confuse me. I wasn't skeptical of the concept. The concept, when they launched it, didn't disappoint me, but the execution did. It feels to me ultimately like they missed the mark on this one, and I personally won't be surprised if they get discontinued. So I'm going to go through really quickly and just give you a flash review of each individual eyeshadow, and then that'll be it. All right, let's start with Teak. So the matte in Teak it performs great. The mattes are pretty consistent. Like I have no complaints about the mattes, except that they feel redundant in a palette where there's a satin in exactly the same shade that ends up looking like a matte on the eyes. It's not the creamiest matte I've ever felt, but the pigment is there and it blends well. It's totally fine. The satin, I really, really love the way it looks. I wish that it retained more of that glossiness when it was on the eyes. And the metallic in this one is pretty rich and dark. I feel like it packs the most punch of the three of these. None of these three is a bad shadow, like an actively super bad shadow. It's just that all three of them together doesn't make a very alluring makeup product, except for that the color is great. I really like the color. Let's talk about clay. I feel pretty similar about clay, actually. The matte is exactly what you would think it would be. It's pretty soft and velvety and blends well, and it's well pigmented, but there just isn't that much difference between the satin and the metallic here. All three of them end up looking pretty matte when they're blended out. None of these three is very shiny, glossy, sparkly. I would never use any of those words to describe either of these two. And the metallic, again, because it's got a little bit more tooth, it just ends up being like the richest and darkest of the three, which is so weird because you think of a metallic as being like the one that you put in the center of your lids to make it shine, to make it pop. If I were trying to build structure and I dipped into this quad, I would go into the metallic to put it in the outer corner, which in this quad kind of makes the satin redundant, weirdly. Prairie is kind of disappointing. I feel like Prairie and Jute are definitely much more disappointing than the two like warmer toned ones. I feel like the matte is the least disappointing of the three. It's a very, very pretty olive green matte. It's perfectly fine. But both the satin and the metallic in Prairie, I find to be a bit dusty. And I love a super satiny, shiny looking olive green. This is just a lackluster one. Maybe they made this kind of underpigmented so that it would be harder for it to mess up, because if you get green all over the place and gets out of control, it can look a little bit like a bruise or a little bit more like a black eye. Maybe they're trying to make it easier to work with. I don't know. I feel like they just didn't think it through, or like didn't beta test it enough or something, because these two shades that are supposed to be shinier are just dustier. And then in Jute, the matte is okay. I feel like this shade, it's okay. It's okay. It could have been worse. It could have been much dustier, but I just don't feel drawn to use that on my eyes. The satin is the one that kind of impressed me. It's got a little bit of a depth. I would use the satin the way one would use a matte and completely eschew the matte. If I were to keep this, which I'm not going to, that's what I would do. The biggest surprise in here is the metallic, because I really liked the way that it swatched, but it performs like garbage. It's just incredibly dusty. It's very dry to the touch. Any of the particles that you think are going to be shimmery, they all just dust away, flake away. I never want to use it again. To me, it's useless. And that's it. This launch feels to me like a big flop. And again, I'm sure that there are people who are enjoying these. I'm sure that there are people who are like, this is all I need. I just need 3 little eyeshadows. They don't have to be very high voltage. They just have to get some color on my eyes. But I feel like Glossier could have delivered something that would work just as well for that demographic, but just could have come up with better formulas. Like, could have given them something that is just better eyeshadow, because there's a lot of really good eyeshadow out there. And it just feels like they didn't do that good of a job of formulating their eyeshadow. This is the last thing I'll say. I actually don't like the way that the eye looks look on the Glossier website. Like, some of those eye looks that you see in the product shots on there, it doesn't look very blended. It looks a little bit awkward. It's not like it's going to be a disaster for everyone who touches it. And I think especially people who are really loyal to Glossier and who have never had powder eyeshadow, who have always kind of wanted to try it, but they've been a little bit nervous, this is a nice gateway. Like, they'll feel comfortable trying it because it's Glossier. And maybe those people won't feel like, it's garbage, because they don't have anything to compare it to. But I wish that Glossier had done them one better. And for the rest of us, those of us who know powder eyeshadow and we have a little collection or a large collection already, we know what we like, we know what it feels like to blend, to create dimension and all of that. I have a hard time thinking that there are many of us who are going to prefer any of these trios over our other eyeshadow. But if you have gotten one or more of these and you've tried it and you've had a different experience, definitely let me know in the comment section down below. This is just my experience. And you know, my experience is predicated on a whole bunch of things, my preferences, the other eyeshadows I've tried, and you know, what it is that I sort of think that we're looking for in eyeshadow. But all of that is just individual to me. It's not even really a pigment thing. Sorry, I said there was something I said it was the last thing I was going to say, but I was wrong. I'm going to say something else. It's not even just a pigment thing, because I have been continuing to enjoy the Gucci palette, and it's not like they're sheer or something, but the formulas are thinner, a little bit more watercolory than really rich, thick, pigmented like Natasha Denona mattes and stuff like that. And I do feel like there's a place for this. There's an application for it. But these formulas, they're watercolory, and they're elegant in their own way. They're elegant at what they're trying to do. I feel like these formulas are not elegant. I feel like they're kind of clunky. And the way that the formulas combine with each other to execute the concept makes the whole thing clunky. All right, I'm gonna go. I think you know how I feel. And I have told you that you should let us know in the comments if you've had a different experience. And I've told you that I'm just one person. I'm gonna move on. I really appreciate you for watching this video. If you came here for a review, I hope you got the information that you needed. If you just came here to hang out with me, I really appreciate you for doing that. And I also hope that you got what you needed. More than any of that though, I hope that all of you are remembering to take extra good care of yourselves so that you can be the most effective version of yourselves as you do your work in the world.